Mindset already surpasses 30. His gaze is cold. At the family banquet, he wouldn't take his eyes off someone. He was fixated on a single target. It was a kid the same age, harmless looking, except Yuri knows exactly what he'll become. A ruthless traitor. The reason an entire kingdom fell, so he has no intention of showing mercy. He challenges the eBay knockoff Sussex to a duel. A duel right here, right now. Scuffing the ground and throwing sand in his opponent's face because chivalry is for people with time to waste. And a kick to the chest that drops the poor guy straight to the ground before anyone can even yell, that's not allowed. His defeat was already sealed. He let the kid go this time, only because he's still a child. But next time, things will be different because in another life, this kid destroyed everything Yuri loved. Not this time. This little menace capable of taking down season knights is Yuri Bool, 3rd Prince of Briel. And if he's already this ruthless at 13, just wait until you see what he becomes. Quick catch up so you don't get lost in this life. He's a prodigy kid. In the other one, because yes, there was another one, he was a washed-up mercenary who just wanted to die in battle and couldn't even manage that properly. Lost his kingdom, lost his family, lost his girlfriend who happened to be the princess of the enemy nation, and decided love was just another word for classified intel to help invade my boyfriend. Real romantic. In the end, life beat him down so hard that an old friend was kind enough to shove a sword through his chest, free of charge, out of pure generosity. And that's when, instead of the hell he clearly deserved, Yuri opened his eyes again, 13 years old, his father alive right next to him, and a second chance he is not wasting this time. But hold on, before this little menace learned how to kick people around, there was a broken man wandering a battlefield with no idea that fight would be the last time he'd ever die. Let's start from the beginning, the real beginning. This story starts in a small village where people whisper about a mercenary running wild across the battlefields. A madman who fights like he does not care if he dies and actually looks disappointed whenever he survives, no matter which side he fights for. Wherever there is a battle, there is one man who seems to want death more than money. His name is Yuri Bool. He is the 3rd prince of what was once a great royal family, and the man blamed for his kingdom's fall left as its only survivor. To understand that, we need to go back 10 years to when he was only 18. Every night he spent his time gambling at the casino with his friends, including Hernando, the court mage, who kept insisting it was time to leave before they were late again. But trouble starts when some men accuse Yuri of cheating. He quickly makes it clear they should not mess with someone like him. The problem is they do not believe he is royalty and use the chance to insult the king, calling him a fool for provoking the empire and making the war even worse. As you can guess, Yuri does not take that well and beats them badly, leaving the casino floor covered in blood and making him late for a meeting with a very important woman, Trina Grand Shane, the princess of the enemy empire. She complains that sneaking there unseen took a lot of effort and warns him again to be more careful with what he does, and says that is enough for Ivana to throw down the necklace he gave her, telling him to give it to some other woman he actually trusts. Then she walks away. Left alone, he wonders how he can get her to forgive him, not knowing their whole talk was overheard by someone with bad intentions. After that, the shaky peace between both sides finally breaks, and the empire stops with simple threats and starts taking the border through small raids until one night, Yuri wakes to screams and destruction, only to discover the empire has invaded his kingdom. That is when the tension turns into a real war with no end and countless losses, including the disappearance of his father, Yuri Bool, known as the strongest man on the continent. With Fior gone, the war starts leaning toward the empire, which keeps winning battle after battle. At first, Yuri thinks it is luck until he realizes Ivana betrayed him, using everything he told her during their relationship to strike when his kingdom was weakest. Worst of all, even with all the proof in front of him, he still wants to trust her. But a note with the word sorry is enough to confirm that his kingdom's fall will be her fault. Once everyone else had fallen, Yuri was the only member of his family still standing. The Empire's strongest warriors threw themselves at him in wave after wave, and even though he had no chance, he kept fighting. They even surrounded him with dozens of enemies. But though he was ready to die, the few allies still alive stepped in and chose to die for him, saying that as long as he lived, the Briel family still had a future. With that in mind, and carrying the weight of his whole people, Yuri had no choice but to run. He hid like a rat in abandoned houses, wondering what had happened to his father, whether there was still hope he might return, or if the Empire had already killed him too. Then an enemy knight found him. Instead of fighting back, Yuri did the only thing that could save his family name. He begged for his life. Then came the surprise. The knight told him the Empire would pay for its sins someday, said there was still time to escape and that if he wanted to live, he had to run. So Yuri kept moving, holding on to the idea of revenge, but it does not take long for reality to hit him. It was all pointless bloodshed. Everyone died, and the only thing left for him was to keep fighting, until someone killed him so he could see his loved ones again. And that brings us back to the present, where after another reckless battle, he is cornered by a different knight who tells him a selfish man like him does not deserve death and calls him by his real name. That is when Yuri realizes the knights know who he is. But it gets worse. They say the kingdom's destruction was his fault, and the shock grows when the knight reveals his face. It is Lauren, one of the protagonist's old subordinates and the first person who gave his life to save him, someone who should have been dead. The shock leaves Yuri frozen, unable to move even when Lauren draws his sword and leaps at him, driving it straight into MC's chest. Yet, the death he wanted so badly still cannot ease his guilt, and he can only think about how much he wants to fix everything. Then something happens. He opens his eyes again, waking up in his younger body, and at that moment, a voice says he cannot believe he slept for 3 whole days. When Yuri returns, he comes face to face with his father, who should obviously be dead. That is why his first thought is that they both ended up in hell, which feels fitting after his sins. But his father jokes that it would make sense for him too, since for all his talk of honor, he did live a pretty messy life. Of course, the king follows that up by smacking Yuri on the head and telling him to stop talking nonsense. He still thinks this must be some kind of illusion until a leaf drifts down in front of him and he looks outside and notices how peaceful everything is. This cannot be hell. He expected pain, sinners, and demons mocking the awful fate he earned. But instead, he is facing his father and brothers, the people he loved most in the world. The shock is so much that he faints. However, when he wakes up, he quickly realizes the truth. He has gone back in time all the way to when he was just 13 years old, with the same events from back then starting again exactly as before. To him, there is no doubt that life has given him another chance, and that is why he decides to begin a very strict routine. He gets up early every morning to train, helped by Emma, his personal maid, who always greets him with a smile. But in the old timeline, or rather the future, he remembers she was killed right in front of him. He could only watch as she died before his eyes, unable to protect her. Those memories still hit hard, partly to wake himself up, and partly because he feels he deserves it. He lets Emma hit him after making sure he will not be locked up for treason. She does the job so well that the idiot shows up for training, with his whole face swollen, and the others around him start laughing. His teacher says nothing, though, and just fights him again and again. Yuri remembers that teaching style very well, because in the other timeline, the man always said the protagonist had talent, but no discipline, and that he could become the kingdom's strongest if he showed a little more will. The problem was hearing that only made Yuri even lazier, to the point that his teacher switched to nothing but sparring, not even bothering to fix his stance or teach him new moves. Remembering that MC asks him to start from the beginning and teach him properly from now on, promising he will give it everything he has. His teacher is surprised but agrees, and the change is instant. His whole expression and stance shift as he declares that from now on the real training begins. Then he attacks with such force that Yuri is pushed back and has to ask for a little mercy because he clearly forgot something important about this man. When he was younger, he was known as the Sword Demon. A couple of hours later, Yuri drops to the ground, shocked that this is the training he missed out on in his past life. He is thankful for his mercenary experience, or he would have been beaten senseless. Still, he cannot complain because he knows this is the only way he will improve. The most shocked person is his teacher, who cannot believe Yuri blocked most of the attacks and wonders when he got this good. But they are interrupted when Emma rushes in desperately looking for him so he can meet Count Jonas, who has come to visit with his son. The problem is that the Count's son is the very man who betrayed the kingdom and opened its gates to the Empire and Yuri's past life. Got Barber, and the protagonist has no plan to let him get away with it this time. That leads us to a scene with his brothers, his father, and the Count, who points out how much MC has changed since the last time he saw him. He says MC has better manners now, and even his body has improved, comparing him again and again to his son Got. Of course, what also stands out here is the way he stares at the poor guy with a murderous look that not only makes him deeply uncomfortable, but also alerts Yuri's second brother, who asks if something happened between him and that boy. The funny part is that the protagonist bluntly calls him a damn traitor. So even though his brother has no idea what he means, he still tells Yuri to put him in his place. MC knows there is still time to stop him from becoming one of the pieces that will drag the kingdom to its ruin. Then he remembers that in the other timeline they fought, and he beat him badly, humiliating him so much that the protagonist starts to wonder if that was where the grudge began, the one that led him to betray them. So he chooses a similar path, but with a twist. He challenges Got to a fight to show what he can do. At first, Got refuses, unsure about fighting one of the princes. Yuri does not even let him think and attacks with everything he has, barely giving him time to block. Worse, he fights dirty, even throwing sand in Got's face. So Got protests and tells him to respect a knight's code, but Yuri ignores him. Instead, he lets go of his sword, uses the surprise, rushes in, and kicks him hard in the chest, sending him to the ground. Of course, Yuri knows that in his past life, this is the man who sold his father's honor to the Empire for information. So trusting him is dangerous. Still, MC also knows it came from sheer desperation, so he offers his hand and promises to help him avoid that path. He wants both of them to have the resolve to fight on. After that, Got leaves, and Yuri stays behind with his brother, who praises him. He says he did well and admits part of him thought he would lose, since until now he only seemed like a spoiled brat obsessed with gambling. The protagonist doesn't deny it, but says he plans to change and that his brother should take that as a sign to improve too. That night he goes to train with his master, who leaves him completely exhausted and says it's time for him to learn a mana control method. More exactly, the special royal family method perfect for an heir like him. The problem is Yuri already mastered that method in his past life and nearly reached its limit. So he wants to try something else, a technique he couldn't even attempt back then. To do that, he asks for the name of someone talented in the royal guard, someone with raw potential, and his teacher recommends Jared, whom Yuri remembers meeting near the end of his past life. The surprise is that what he remembers is nothing like what you'd expect from a prodigy. Back then, Jared looked average, pathetic even, and MC is amazed he survived that long. Still, he often heard him complain that he hadn't trained hard enough when he was young and hadn't used the talent everyone said he had. After thinking it over, Yuri gets ready to meet the man who may become his next knight and push him to become what he was always meant to be. With that in mind, he heads to the Knight Academy where the rookies are training at full force. He quickly asks for Jared and learns his teacher wasn't exaggerating when he called him the most gifted of the new generation. While everyone else struggles to put up a decent fight, Jared stands out without even breaking a sweat. The problem is that lazy attitude will eventually turn him into a dull blade, wasting all that talent. So Yuri chooses the same answer he used with Guy, a fight. He asks the training officer to let him join, then picks Jared as his opponent. Even though Jared is about 3 heads taller, Yuri steps right in front of him and says he's heard a lot about him, asking to see what kind of knight he really is. Meanwhile, Jared has no idea what's going on and doesn't even care to fight, but he has no choice except to accept. The protagonist starts the match by throwing himself at him with surprising intensity. But the truly amazing one is Jared, who blocks him and keeps up without even moving, using sharp exact moves that make it seem like victory is already his. Or at least that's how it looks at first, because Yuri slowly starts reading the distance better and better, putting him under more pressure while matching his rhythm, until they're so even that Yuri suggests making things more interesting. Now they'll fight for real, and he attacks with one of his most advanced moves. To his surprise, Jared blocks it perfectly, though with some effort proving his reflexes are monstrous. But MC isn't the only one shocked. Jared realizes he can't keep taking it easy, so now he finally gets serious to the point that Yuri knows he has no real chance of winning. Luckily, that was never the goal. He just wanted to push him hard enough to wake up his drive, and that means giving everything he has until he lands a clean hit, which he actually manages to do. Everyone watching is stunned by how well he fights for just a kid, and they immediately ask Jared if he was holding back. Jared says, not at all. Even so, even though he's the one controlling the fight, for some reason he feels cornered, and the idea of trading evenly with a little runt frustrates him so much that bright blue energy suddenly wraps around him. Everyone panics. There's only one meaning. He's using a mana method against one of the princes. They yell for him to stop, but it's already too late. Jared charges at Yuri, who barely manages to dodge the next strike and loses several locks of hair to the force of the slash. There's no doubt that if he hadn't dodged, he could have lost his head. When Jared finally realizes what he almost did, he panics and begs for forgiveness. But after the shock, Yuri tells him not to worry and asks him to attack again because now things are finally getting interesting. He rushes in again with even more intensity than before. And as Jared follows along, he sees that this brat's eyes are different. He's a maniac who gives 100% in every move and seems set on pushing him to the limit, even knowing that it works because Jared can't stop himself from reacting to the challenge and wanting to go farther than he ever thought possible. With that, his lazy stance disappears and turns fully serious. He can feel his blood start to boil harder than ever before, not even against stronger opponents. And without a second thought, he attacks again. And Yuri answers so well that Jared admits this is the best fight he's ever had because, for the first time in his life, he truly wants to win. He strikes with so much force that Yuri's sword snaps in two, officially ending the battle. Right away, the protagonist holds out his hand and tells him he learned something. Jared has hidden strength unlike anyone else. Jared feels the same, admitting the brat showed the fighting spirit of a real warrior, not a younger prince. Then Yuri shocks him again, saying he'll have to answer for injuring someone from the royal family. So, the poor guy runs off to get a first aid kit. Meanwhile, the other trainees congratulate Yuri for keeping up with one of their own. But they aren't the only ones who saw the fight. They soon realize it was all witnessed by Zind, the captain of the Ball Royal Guard, who still hasn't finished processing the hidden gems he just found. After that, a few days pass until Yuri stops Jared in the barracks hallway and tells him to come along because they need to go somewhere very specific. Jared insists he needs to train, but MC won't back off. He reminds him that this new attitude and better discipline are thanks to him. In short, Jared owes him for stopping him from staying mediocre. Yuri knows he still has a long way to go before his body can match his mental strength, but that won't be enough for now. Then comes the surprise. They won't be going alone, but with one more person, Hernando, who was once one of Yuri's best friends in the other timeline, but is now just a beginner court mage. Of course, he barely knows him at this point, so Hernando also insists he has other things to do. The protagonist uses his status as prince to bribe him, offering to pay off all the debt he owes at the casino. Instantly, the poor guy's eyes light up. Still, he asks why he should trust Yuri when he's also a gambling-addicted psychopath who says he should just trust him and take his word for it. But Hernando wants something more solid, an actual deal, making it clear that even if he's a prince and all that, his word alone isn't worth much. Yuri even asks Herod to witness his good faith. And cornered like that, the blonde finally agrees, accepting on one condition: MC has to be honest and tell them where they're going and why he needs both a knight and a mage. At last, Yuri admits their destination is Sword Mountain, and the mission is to help him raid his ancestor's dungeon. To get there, they start through a network of tunnels hidden right under the palace, which he says leads straight to the mountain's entrance, a place tied to a powerful legend about his ancestor, one known across the empire. What the others don't know, but Yuri saw with his own eyes in his past life, is that after the Empire invaded Briel, they discovered the legend was true. There really was a huge dungeon inside Sword Mountain where the first leader of the Baal family had hidden treasures. They also found those passages, and thanks to them, they used the Baal legacy before its own family could. Yuri won't let that happen again. In this life, he'll do everything he can to move forward, instead of falling behind. More than that, he wants to see for himself the legacy the Empire stole, so they keep going until they reach the foot of the mountain and pass through a door whose key the protagonist always had nearby, though he only learned what it was for after the Empire invaded. Of course, Hernando has plenty of questions about how MC knows so much that even his brothers don't know. But Yuri tells him to be quiet and warns him about the plants around them, which are poisonous and will make him suffer if he doesn't watch his step. Even so, the way he moves through the place makes it look like he's walked it many times before, and the others notice. They wonder what's gotten into him and joke around a little until suddenly Yuri shouts for them to stop, warning them about a pack of dire wolves. The strange part is that this pack is way too big. That should make them easier to beat. That shocks Hernando, because knowing that much about these beasts can only mean one thing: Yuri is the worst bookworm in the kingdom. Even so, the protagonist tells them to move carefully, but everything falls apart right there. Hernando ends up stepping on a twig, and the sound is enough for a wolf to leap at him. It would have killed him in seconds if not for Jared stepping in and cutting its neck in one strike. The impressive part is that without knowing anything about these creatures, he used mana. He saw the fur was too tough for a normal hit. So Yuri praises him, but also points out a huge mistake. They've not only alerted the rest of the pack, but the Alpha too, and it orders the attack right away. So within seconds they're surrounded, and Jared decides to take charge, dropping them one by one. The problem is it's still not enough, and the wolves start gaining ground. That's why Yuri orders the mage to join in and show why his father trusts him so much. He gladly agrees, releasing dozens of fireballs he controls with skill to turn the wolves into ashes. After that, even more monsters show up, but they beat every one of them, and finally reach the top of the Sword Mountain where there's absolutely nothing. Jared even asks if this is really the right place. Yuri ignores him and starts to search until he spots a tiny glowing red point sticking out of the dirt. After digging a little, it turns out to be the hilt of a huge sword. The odd part is that at first glance, it doesn't even look like it's been buried for centuries. It looks completely new and stranger still. It has the word guilty carved into its blade. Jared asks if this is the founder's great relic, and Yuri says he's not sure, but they can find out, because right then, the ground beneath them starts collapsing until they fall into a deep pit that is actually the entrance to the secret dungeon of the Bowl family. When they finally hit the ground, Yuri realizes Jared protected him by softening their fall with a thick layer of mana. While Hernando comes down safely using air magic, the mage also lights the way with another spell. They find a long hallway that seems completely empty until something else appears, a night spirit covered in dense dark mist. Yuri instantly recognizes it as a night of death, which means serious danger. So he orders Herod to get up. And even though the poor guy still hasn't recovered from the fall, a couple of kicks are enough to get him on his feet and standing in front of Yuri, ready to protect him from the threat. The problem is that just like the name says, Knights of Death are ancient warriors who came back from the dead, and somehow they became even stronger than they were in life. Then MC realizes something else. This one is harmless because its real job is to guard the dungeon for the Emperor. That means it shouldn't be hostile toward him since he has royal blood, and his guess is confirmed when he steps in front of it and the knight draws its sword. Not to attack, but to drive it into the ground as a sign of respect. Of course, Hernando nearly has a heart attack. Then things get even stranger when the knight speaks, saying Yuri's arrogant attitude is just like Eric Bowles, a name they recognize immediately. He was the famous swordsman who conquered the continent with a single sword, the founder of the kingdom they now live in. Curious, Yuri asks if he's the first one to enter, and the knight says yes. Only descendants of the Baal family can draw that sword, the same one he used in his time. That's why he asks what he plans to do with this place. Yuri introduces himself properly and demands the founder's legacy as his rightful inheritance. The dungeon falls falls into complete silence until the knight tells him to follow, since this is exactly why he was placed there. As they walk away, Jared can't shake the feeling that something is very strange about all of this. Yuri tells him to stop wasting time and come along, and the shock comes when his words mix with flashes from the other timeline, which of course Jared doesn't understand. He assumes he's just stressed by the whole situation. And soon they reach a group of crystals. The knight simply tells them he hopes they are worthy. Then the crystals suddenly light up and transport them to what looks like a desert. But when Yuri looks around for the others, he realizes he's completely alone, except for a human-shaped figure with no face, like some kind of puppet rushing at him ready to fight. It's being controlled by a mana technique, and in that moment the figure activates the mana inside itself and channels it into the sword, as if it's showing him how mana control really works. It also tells him to copy its movements, acting like a brutal mentor while beating him down. Still, Yuri knows this is insane, especially since a kid his age shouldn't even know how to copy a technique this advanced. But the protagonist is definitely not an average kid, and for the first time in this life he activates his mana technique. It doesn't shine as brightly as the figures, and it's nowhere close in power, but it finally excites his opponent, who notices his resolve and gets ready to strike. As Yuri fights, he thinks he has to become stronger before the Empire destroys his life for good. No matter what, he will not make the same mistake again. And the more he battles the figure, the more he realizes it represents the Founder's techniques, and he plans to learn every move while he can. Meanwhile, Jared wakes up in a room identical to the kingdom's training grounds and wonders if he's dreaming until he senses something nearby. It tells him to attack, and he comes face to face with a perfect copy of himself. At that point, he's sure beating himself is part of the Knight of Death's trial. The strange thing is that unlike the figure facing Yuri, this other Jared can speak, telling him to stop fighting his fate. It reminds him that he became a royal guard because he wanted an easy life, so he should stay away from the prince if he doesn't want his life filled with hardship. That hits him hard, and for a moment, Jared thinks the old him would have agreed completely and gone back to the palace already. But remembering his fight with Yuri reminds him that out there's more than just comfort. He also wants the thrill of achieving something, so he tells the copy it's out of date. He's not the same anymore. A sword that's already been swung can't be stopped by empty words, and he won't hesitate. The clone instantly activates its aura and attacks with a blow that is powerful but very simple, and Jared blocks it with no trouble. He realizes his opponent fights exactly like his old self, lazy, using basic strategies, and always avoiding even the smallest risk. It's a totally dull style, and now he looks down on it. He lands several clean hits until he knocks the clone down, calling it painfully boring. Then, out of nowhere, the clone starts melting and turns into a giant clay golem, its true form, the same kind Yuri must be facing right now. Before attacking, Jared prays that MC can overcome his own trial too. With that, we return to his battle and see the desert has changed. What used to be endless dead sand is now a wasteland filled with broken swords. Worst of all, one of those shattered rocks may as well be Yuri's body. He can't even move or run, as the figure comes closer, ready to finish him. It strikes, leaving only the impact and trails of mana behind. Luckily, from another angle, the result is nothing like we expected, because in the final instant before the hit landed, Yuri managed to grab his sword and properly activate the mana method, landing his first direct hit of the entire fight. Of course, he knows that never would have happened without that brutal training and the beating the Founder gave him up to now. But when he sees the figure's sword begin to crumble, and the figure itself slowly fade into the air, it even says goodbye, which can only mean time is up. Yuri uses that moment to thank it for everything it taught him. After that, he, Jared, and Hernando return to the cave where the Knight of Death is already waiting. It explains that what they just experienced is the Founder's inheritance. He left part of his consciousness behind for the first Baal heir who managed to reach that place. Yuri remembers that in his past life, the mountain was completely destroyed by the Empire, which means they never could have completed the Founder's trial back then. What's even more amazing is that the mana method he was taught wasn't the one the Founder used in his prime, but one he developed in his final days after gathering everything he had learned in life. In other words, techniques nobody else knows. On top of that, the dungeon was built to open only at the right time, which means the only thing the knight can tell him is its name, the soul separation technique. But that's not all the dungeon holds, because the Knight of Death tells him to kneel. They're about to pass on the Founder's legacy, and to receive it, he must swear never to fear. Their enemies act without wavering, follow what they believe is right, and carry the duty of Bowl to the very end. After each vow, Yuri answers with a loud yes. The knight grabs him by the hair and forces him to meet his eyes, telling him to remember this well. Abel never abandons home, even if it means death. That is the Founder's legacy. Yuri's eyes shine in a way that makes it clear he understands it now more than ever. After that, they return to the palace, and a few days later, Emma wakes him up very early in the morning, saying the time has come, and scolding him for staying up so late the night before. Yuri explains he had something he needed to find. He does not tell her much, but he had been searching the royal family's old records until he found a small note saying the Founder was not an only child. He had a brother, a man who left home and vanished from history without even leaving a name. That man was the Death Knight who showed Yuri the truth, and most likely the real owner of the sword. Someone who gave up any glory to serve his brother and the kingdom until death. Then Emma reminds him that her father is calling for him. She does not know why, but the order came right after. He met with Hernando. So the protagonist realizes the mage told his father everything that happened that night. It is not really surprising since Hernando warned him he would. So Yuri has no choice but to go to the throne room where his only proof for everything that happened used to be his word alone. But now he has a new sword to back it up. And at first his father says little. He simply walks up and points out that Yuri's attitude has not been the same for a long time, and he wants to know what changed him. MC hesitates for quite a while, but in the end he admits part of the truth, saying he had a dream where he lived through a crime he committed, one that made everything fall apart. His father asks what crime he means, and Yuri says it was failing to protect Bel to the end. In that dream, the kingdom was trapped in a war, and many people were slaughtered. Even though he tried to protect them with everything he had, he failed again and again until the kingdom fell, and he made the most cowardly choice of all. He ran, leaving behind his honor. In the end, he died. Most important of all, after waking from that dream, the necklace his mother gave him was gone. So, he feels that the dream was a warning from her, a way to give him a second chance. The problem is that while his father wants more details about who started the war, Yuri knows it is too soon to mention the Empire. So he says it was done by an army he could not identify, which only leaves more questions behind. Even so, his father is just glad that the change is for the better, and Yuri thinks the only thing he wants is to make up for his sins. Then his father says there is something else they need to discuss and that it is time for him to draw his sword. At that point, we learn more about the king, who started training almost as soon as he learned to walk and carved his name into history as the strongest among the continent's top 10. Right now, Yuri knows he is still in his prime, so he is shocked to be the first son ever invited into his private training hall. Fiore admits he always thought none of his children had inherited his gift with the sword. In short, he saw them as useless. Yuri tries to argue back, saying he does have talent, which makes his father challenge him to a duel and ask what talent really means. Is it strength, speed, reflexes, or do all those things automatically make someone a good swordsman? Or is there something more? At that moment, Yuri remembers his past self, knowing he definitely had all those traits. But before he can answer, his father tells him no, because there is something more important than any of that. Something that lets a person go past their limits. Something stronger than fear, or even duty. Then Fiore suddenly activates his mana method, and in less than a heartbeat, Yuri feels the whole room's aura change at once, throwing his body into pure survival mode. Thankfully, his father lowers the sword and the pressure fades, explaining that to him that factor is the call of the sword, a sign of his path. Yuri is left confused, wondering if he means fate. He starts to think that in his past life he was never meant to follow the path of a swordsman, while in this life something has changed. With a firm look, his father asks if he believes he is meant to wield a sword, if even in the moment of his death he would still hold to his beliefs and his will to fight, something Yuri still is not fully sure about. But then everything turns darker when his father's shape stops looking like his father and becomes dozens of red eyes staring down at him in contempt. In an instant, Yuri is surrounded by nothing but darkness and hears the screams of everyone who died protecting him in his other life, along with visions of the kingdom's destruction, visions that feel like more than memories. It is as if he has been dragged right back to that moment where he is slowly surrounded by enemy soldiers who keep advancing. He is thrown back into that nightmare. Everything feels real. The heat of the kingdom warms his armor, and the attacks that start crashing against his sword put him on edge. He knows it is a feint and that he is finished. That is why he starts defending himself and fighting just like he did last time, until he hears voices shouting for him to run, saying they will hold the enemy back. Once again, his men save his life by dying horribly right in front of him, while he wonders if everything new he lived through was only a dream, and whether Briel was always meant to fall in the most horrible way, no matter how hard he tries to stop it. But this time, unlike that timeline, he has the Death Knight's sword. Clutching the blade, marked guilty, Yuri reminds himself that he already made a vow to never fear his enemies no matter what. One by one, the Death Knight's words fill his mind, pushing him to act by his beliefs and fulfill his duty. Instead of running, Yuri stays and fights beside the others, and with every strike he starts cutting down the remaining enemies, not caring that his chances of winning are almost zero. He ends up surrounded again just like before. But instead of thinking about everything that could go wrong, he thinks about what could still go right. Then he unleashes his aura, making it clear that the people of Bool do not abandon their strength, not even in the face of death. With his faith unshaken, he charges in, ready to fight to his last breath. But then the vivid vision he had been seeing suddenly vanishes, replaced by the ceiling of his father's private training hall, where Yuri keeps repeating over and over until the end, as if trapped in some kind of trance. It is so strange that even his father grows worried when he sees the protagonist's eyes glowing a bright red, and asks several times if he can hear him until MC finally snaps awake, confused because only seconds ago he had been surrounded by the Black Army. Thankfully, his father stays calm and says everything he saw was only an illusion, but he cannot hide his worry or his pride, because in Yuri's stance and resolve he saw that his fate points to only one thing: wielding the sword. That also makes him smile. Not just because he won his father's approval, but because living through that war again reminded him this is not about fate. He already chose to change his future for the better. Still, he is not stupid. He can see in his father's eyes that he is worried and looking at him like he might die at any second. So Yuri jokes a little and tells him to leave things in his hands. After all, he is a genius. In response, his father hits him so hard that when Yuri shows up for daily training, it looks like he has a second head. That earns him mockery from his teacher, who says even that will not save him from what they have planned for him. This time, the protagonist already knows that, but seeing the man again makes him wonder why he stayed in Briel all those years instead of returning to his homeland. The answer is simple. He accepted a condition that would one day earn him the right to duel Yuri's father. Of course, that means he will leave someday. So, MC asks if he would stay if he asked him to. The answer is no. The only thing that would make him remain longer is being shown something interesting, like the Founder's famous lost sword technique. His teacher clearly already knows what really happened during that expedition a few days ago. And while Yuri understands why someone so obsessed with swords would want to learn a new technique, he cannot teach it. The man says it does not matter if he has not fully mastered it yet. He just wants a look. The protagonist tells him that is not the issue. Even if he shows it, it will not help because the Founder's technique is directly tied to the mana method. That is where things get strange, since methods are usually used to strengthen sword techniques, not become part of them. Yuri admits he still does not fully understand how it works, but he knows that if he shows it, the teacher will only get part of the information and not the full technique. The thing is, his teacher does not care. He is so curious that he is willing to stay in Bal as long as Yuri wants. If MC shows him even half the technique, his teacher is sure he can still learn a lot from it. After teasing him a little, he agrees and tells him to stay in Briel. Then he activates his mana method with Soul Cut and gets ready to strike. But his teacher suddenly admits that he always planned to stay in Briel at least 10 more years. That leaves Yuri looking pretty dumb, while his teacher gladly takes this new chance to learn everything he can. With that settled, the teacher gets ready to fight, and the protagonist uses the anger from being played to rush at him with everything he has, turning it into one of his best training sessions yet. Later, Yuri goes back to his room where he takes time to think about how the future is changing. He no longer believes that vision was fully a memory from the past or some random illusion. It was a glimpse of the future shaped by the small changes he has made. The fact that his teacher still chose to stay is more proof of that. And even if these changes still are not enough to stop the war with the Empire, every small step is clearly building towards something bigger. The worst part is knowing it all depends on him and what he chooses, so he has to find something else, some way to stop the Empire once and for all. Then Emma shows up beside him and tells him to stop getting into trouble and wasting time when he has a meeting tomorrow with none other than the kingdom's senate. Surprisingly, it was his own father who suggested it. And for the first time in a long while, every senator will be there. So Emma makes him promise to behave and not pick a fight with anyone. Yuri tries to explain that he does not act like that anymore, but his track record says otherwise. After that, we move to the famous meeting where the main issue is, of course, the Founder's sword technique. Several dukes keep insisting they cannot let the prince use a mana method that has not been approved. What should have been a serious talk about running the kingdom turns into a power struggle, a complete circus where the real goal is just to challenge the king. And that is when Yuri finally understands why his father never bothered attending these stupid meetings. Some dukes argue that if the method was left behind by the founder as a legacy, then it should not need testing. But the real question they raise is whether it truly belongs to the founder at all, or if MC made it up while hiding behind fake concern. Yuri finally speaks, pointing out how absurd it is to call a full meeting just to talk about him and his mana method when there are bigger issues, including the fact that he knows most of them are traitors who will turn on the kingdom the moment the Empire attacks. Of course, it is his guard who cuts in, saying it is still too early to make a final judgment since mana methods can cause different side effects depending on the person. The dukes twist that into proof that nobody can say it is safe and claim Yuri should be banned from using it. What is worse, some of them even dare to say that this does not necessarily mean anything bad, but the people against him are the majority, and they push hard to force everyone down the same path. The problem is that a person can only change their mana method when very little time has passed since learning the first one. But after his battle with the founder, Yuri can feel that soul cut has already taken root in his core, so switching methods could backfire on him. He tries to find the words to explain that when one of the people who had stayed silent finally speaks. Baron Hernando asks them how many of them have actually fought in a real battle. The room instantly falls into deep silence, broken only by a few quiet murmurs, until the Duke leading the attack on Yuri asks who the hell he is, and more importantly, what title he holds. That is when Hernando stands and introduces himself as a free baron, which sets off laughter because someone of such low rank should not be at a senate meeting, much less speak as freely as a duke. But everything changes when Hernando reveals he was invited personally by Count Sidor. That shuts them up fast because Sidor leads the territory guarding Bol's borders. He is one of the kingdom's strongest warriors and is famous for never attending meetings like this. He had never even bothered to send a representative before, so they ask what changed. Hernando makes it clear that is none of their business. What he can say is that this whole conversation is stupid because the type of mana method does not matter much on a battlefield. If they had really been warriors, they would know that. In the end, what matters most is the person using it. Yuri jumps on that point, saying no one should question the Founder's mana method, and that no matter what they think, he has already made his choice. He is going to learn it. Hernando backs him up, saying they should follow the Founder's will because there is nothing dangerous about it. If anything, trying to change it is the real insult. His words are a little harsher than that, so they warn him to watch his tongue. He apologizes, saying, life on the battlefield fighting orcs can ruin a person's manners. After all, the orcs do not care what mana method the person cutting off their head is using. It seems like the argument is over when someone else tries to claim Yuri is still too young to make that kind of choice. But he reminds them that the only way to know whether the method is safe is to use it. And between him and Hernando, they shut the critics down again and again until the dukes finally snap. They practically tell Hernando to go back to the border, saying all it does is drain resources. And that is a low blow, because everyone knows it is a brutal land where soldiers die every day to monsters, including Hernando's lifelong friends, whose bodies he himself has had to identify after each massacre. So, no, they do not waste resources for fun. They need them, because the orcs never rest, and they are the only ones holding them back to protect the kingdom. That makes Yuri remember that in the past a huge massacre happened around this same time, because of conflicts between Bool and the Klein army, which the orcs used as their chance to attack. So he asks how things have been lately, and Hernando tells him they are more tense than ever. Many towns have been completely destroyed, and at that moment Yuri realizes the timing matches, and it could all be tied to the Duke's son. Clearly, though, his reaction catches everyone's attention. So he decides to leave, saying that instead of wasting time on useless talk, there are many other problems they should be handling. With that, he walks out. Still, his attitude does not go unnoticed by Hernando, who that same night contacts Count Sidor and tells him everything, including the rumors that Yuri has changed and the determined look in his eyes. In the end, the Count decides the protagonist is worth looking into and orders Hernando to learn everything he can. Hernando agrees and spends a while looking out, thinking about how peaceful the capital seems until something catches his attention. Yuri moving through the streets in a hood with the look of someone about to do something important. Of course, Hernando follows. MC is not alone, though. He is with Hernando, who has no idea where they are going, and keeps acting paranoid, reminding him that he is not allowed out this late, especially without permission. But his attitude changes when Yuri reveals they are not going just anywhere. They are heading to a casino, specifically the biggest illegal casino in the capital. And since Hernando knows where it is, his job is to guide him there. At first, Hernando refuses, fighting the gambler inside him that wants to throw away every coin he has. But when Yuri says he has to do it for the good of Briel, the best excuse possible, everything changes and he happily leads the way. Then he explains that in his past life, 3 people caused chaos and indirectly helped bring about the fall of Bool, the leader of the underworld, a business tycoon who ran the most successful merchant guild on the continent. And last, a notorious assassin who beheaded the underworld boss and took that place, starting an age of terror in Bool's streets. Those are the first pieces he needs to move. So, he starts by visiting the casino where they are welcomed by Cory, a professional loan shark and the current leader of the underworld. He greets them so politely that Yuri instantly realizes Cory already knows who he is. And Cory says he could not let them visit his place without greeting them in person. Since they are being honest, the protagonist makes it clear he did not come just to play a few games. And Cory understands that right away, inviting them to sit down so they can talk properly. The only one unhappy about any of this is Fernando, who really did come to gamble. But Yuri shuts him down, then reveals he came to ask for a loan for an investment he has been planning. What is interesting is that he could have gone to a bank, yet he came here instead. Cory tries to question him about it, but MC refuses to say exactly why he wants the money, only that he plans to buy Mistranja, a species from the Klein region that will soon become far more valuable. Hernando immediately calls it insane, and Cory points out that it is mostly used in luxury perfumes and little else. But Yuri insists he knows exactly what he is doing, which leaves them both wondering how he can possibly be so sure about something like that. Then Yuri asks how much Cory is willing to lend him, not as the prince, but as him Broly. After thinking it over for a moment, Cory simply slides over a promissory note and tells him to sign it. They leave, hardly believing it was that easy, or that he would hand over that much money. As for Hernando, the poor guy is just upset that Yuri dragged him along. He drags Hernando out without letting him play even once, and the protagonist says they're not done yet. They're heading to the Merchant Guild next. The profit is basically guaranteed because Miranda is a very rare item made by a single alchemist connected to Duke Klein, and he'll be one of the first to die when the Civil War starts. So if Yuri buys enough of it now, he can raise the price as high as he wants. That's why he takes Hernando to the Merchant Guild. Right now, though, the place is nothing but a ruined house. Of course, Hernando says this should be left to people who actually know business. But MC knows exactly what its leader can become. His next chess piece is A, who opens the door with no idea who they are. So Yuri introduces himself as the Prince of Briel and says he came to entrust her with something very important. After they finish talking, they leave, and now Hernando is even more sure he has lost his mind, because trusting that much money to a business that's clearly falling apart makes no sense. What he doesn't know is that this slump won't last long. Before long, A will be known across the continent not just as a gifted merchant, but as someone who keeps her promises, unlike Guo, who would betray anyone in a second. Yuri's real goal is to help her become even greater in this new timeline. And just when Hernando asks if he's finally done doing crazy things, the protagonist says there's still one more stop, the most important one of all. So he leads him through the dark alleys of the city to find his third ally, ending up in the slums where rats are everywhere and people fight to the death over a piece of bread. In the middle of that mess, he finds a blue-haired girl who seems harmless right now, but before long, she'll be the one who kills Goryo and climbs to the top of the assassin order, called Asana. Like anyone would, she's shocked to see a prince in a place like that, but Yuri tells her not to be scared. He only came to help. Then out of nowhere, he hands her a bag full of money, and behind Asana he notices a small girl who looks seriously ill. That reminds him how in his past life, Asana's conflict with Goryo began when she asked him for a huge loan so the child could get the treatment she badly needed. The problem was that like everyone else who dealt with that man, she was crushed by the interest and had no way to pay it back. That's why she was forced to become an assassin under him. And she grew into one of the deadliest of them all. This time, Yuri doesn't want to use her. He wants to stop her from going down that path. So he tells her to use the money to treat the little girl, asking for nothing back except that she remember the name Bool. After that, he just heads back home, and Hernando asks why he gives so much money to a beggar. Yuri's answer is simple. It's an investment in the future. In one night, he built ties with people who will matter later. At this point, his plan is almost complete. He only needs one more piece. Then, out of nowhere, he asks Hernando what he saw in the founder's tomb. Hernando goes quiet before answering. In his vision, he was gambling in one of the biggest casinos in the Empire. That doesn't surprise Yuri at all. He just asks him to keep what he saw a secret. But that clearly doesn't last long, because the next day, Yuri's father summons him and asks where they were last night. Hernando answers honestly, admitting him dragged him straight to the biggest casino in the kingdom. That shocks the king. But the Yurambada the Penish boys. Bigger surprise is that Hernando keeps the protagonist's real secret, insisting all they did was gamble and lose all the money they brought. After that, they just walked around because Yuri wanted to see how ordinary people live. Then they went back to the palace without any trouble, and he sticks to that story no matter how much the king presses him. That leaves the ruler feeling like they're hiding something. Then he asks if Hernando plans to attend the ball. To his surprise, Hernando says yes. He admits he usually hates events like that, but it's been a long time since he danced, and it might be interesting. As for Yuri, he goes back to his daily training with his teacher, who notices he's become pretty popular with the palace ladies. They keep hanging around during practice, so his teacher tells him he has to attend the next ball. But Yuri brushes that aside. He cares more about discussing the founder's technique because his teacher studied it and found no fixed form or pattern he can copy. MC says that's exactly what he's been trying to explain. It's more like a feeling, something in his body telling him how to move with the flow of mana inside him. The best way to study it would be to watch him fight for real. But setting that up isn't easy. So his teacher just praises how fast he's improved, especially with mana control, admitting he didn't expect him to learn it so quickly. In his head, Yuri feels a little bad that he can't explain it better. Almost like he can read his mind. His teacher tells him not to worry, and says he's pushing himself too hard. After all, he's already done far more than any boy his age, and he's still growing. Yuri quickly shrugs that off and says they should train again, this time with real swords to make it interesting. Without hesitation, his teacher agrees and takes his stance. He suggests a bet. If he wins, his teacher has to go to the ball, and if he loses, nothing. His teacher cuts him off, saying the bet is pointless because there's no way he can lose. That's all Yuri needs. He charges at him, ready to make him eat those words. He does lose, but the interesting part comes with a scene change. A few days later, when several carriages pass through the city gates inside, one is Jorge, the second prince of the empire, along with someone we already know, Trina, who says she's excited because there's someone she's wanted to see for a long time. Most likely that awful girl means Yuri, who at that very moment stands still like a doll while Emma finishes getting him ready for the big ball. The whole time he keeps complaining about how flashy the outfit is, but once he's ready, he offers Emma his hand and asks her to dance with him so he can practice. What seems like the start of something sweet falls apart fast when she looks at him suspiciously, worried he might step on her foot, and Yuri admits he can't promise anything before taking her firmly and telling her not to worry. The teasing suddenly turns into a deep blush from Emma, who says she's a very skilled dancer with lots of experience, though she's never danced with someone this short. In the end, they share a really warm and sweet moment, which becomes the lead into the grand ball, where the king watches everything while Yuri and his brothers catch up and study the political mood around them. He even notices that Count Satyr came to the ball, which is rare. He also sees his older brother wearing glasses more often. His brother says not to worry, and the conversation is cut short by the loud sound of the doors opening as Jorge arrives and walks straight to Spory. introducing himself, thanking him for the invitation and all the usual formal talk. Of course, he didn't come alone. Trina is with him, bowing before them with stunning grace, and Yuri freezes, thinking of the bond they once had, until that image shatters the second he remembers her betrayal and the cold letter she sent, asking for forgiveness. That's why Yuri reminds himself he can't make the same mistake again. He keeps his eyes down while she keeps looking at him with fake kindness. After that, the protagonist manages to step away and distracts himself by watching Cedric, his older brother, dance with every lady at the party. Not because he's a flirt, but because he's too kind to let anyone feel left out. The problem starts when he notices Trina won't stop watching him, and he wonders how he's supposed to act around someone who technically still hasn't done anything wrong, but brings back terrible memories he could never forget. Luckily, Emma steps in and saves him by offering him a cookie and joking around a little. His mood lifts right away, but it doesn't last long because right then, Jorge walks up to him, another man tied to awful memories since he led the Empire's troops, and in the end was one of the men who brought Briel to ruin. Yuri can't show open hostility, so he greets him as politely as possible, while the blonde prince studies him with a careful stare. But then, out of nowhere, Jorge smiles and unleashes his mana technique, sending out waves of sharp aura that flood MC's body and nearly freeze him in place. The good news is that MC holds out, impressing the blonde prince, who leaves after admitting the boy has real talent. In short, it was both a test and a threat, and he realizes this Jorge is no different from the one he knew in the other timeline. Then everything goes wrong when a loud noise erupts. Yuri turns and sees Emma kneeling in front of Jorge, desperately trying to apologize after she tripped and spilled wine on the cloak bearing the symbol of the Empire. Jorge instantly notices the worry on the protagonist's face, and instead of saying it's fine, he smiles, draws his sword and warns her that she has made a very serious mistake, one that by the laws of the crown under crown law, that crime should mean death. Yuri knows it was no accident. Jorge did it on purpose to show power. In real, though, everyone saw Emma spill the wine, so all the blame falls on her, and Jorge keeps pushing it. He repeats that she must pay, saying beheading her would be enough to restore his honor under the law. Then he throws MC the same smug look as before. Even though MC looks ready to lunge at him, his father steps in first and says if Jorge wants blood, he can take it from his own people. Right away, Jorge puts away his sword and apologizes, saying the Empire and Briel have always had a good relationship until now. Fury agrees, but warns that if this disrespect keeps up, he will not stay patient. Then Jorge brings up the time Fiora himself executed one of the Empire's knights. He says the Emperor let that pass to keep the peace without demanding any punishment, and argues this is the same kind of case. So according to him, Briel should execute the maid to make things even. He claims he does not want this. He is only asking for justice. That leaves Fior trapped, and by now even Yuri understands that going against Jorge means going against the Empire, and his mind fills with countless ways this could end badly. But there is one thing that matters now. He made a vow. The people of Bel do not throw away their honor. So even if this could make everything worse, Yuri still steps forward and says Emma is his personal maid, so her mistake is his. In other words, he is ready to take the punishment in Emma's place. To everyone else, that sounds insane, but not to Yuri. He feels like all this time is borrowed anyway, and he does not care if he dies doing the right thing. That said, he is not planning to die quietly. He asks Jorge to settle this with a trial by combat, instead of an execution. That shocks Jorge so much he bursts out laughing and accepts, then asks the king if he agrees to settle it that way. Fior hesitates, but he knows he cannot back down and shame Yuri, so he agrees. Jorge then says it would not be fair for them to fight each other, so he will choose the youngest man in his royal guard to represent him. After that, he simply walks away and he thanks Fior. Then he goes to Emma and helps her up after the terror she just went through, and she starts crying, asking how he could risk so much so easily. He tells her there is nothing to worry about. But then he notices Trina still staring at him. Part of him stupidly wants to talk to her, but he walks away instead. Everyone is watching him, including Hernando. A little later, Cedric stops him and asks what he was thinking. When Yuri says he just could not stand by and let them kill Emma. Cedric smiles and pats his head, clearly proud. Yuri takes those few seconds to enjoy being close to his brother. Then Cedric says something important. He offers to help, explaining Jorge's deal was not as generous as it sounded. Since the fighter replacing him is close in age to the protagonist, an accident could happen. In other words, they could kill him and get away with it. Luckily, Yuri already knows that. And even when Cedric offers to fight for him, MC says no. A prince has to finish what he starts, and his brother could not be prouder. He tells him to get some rest. He has a battle to win soon. Yuri thinks his brother is one of the kindest people he knows, and part of why he wants to save Briel is to see what kind of kingdom it could become under someone like him. The next day, he arrives for the duel. Jorge watches from the front row while Hernando is deeply moved, seeing his little boy in his first real fight. And Zanet adds that Yuri's opponent looks strong and steady, handling the sword amazingly well, even though he still is not a knight. So, he wonders if the protagonist will really be okay. Hernando just smiles and tells him to watch MC's movements closely. Once the fight starts, he will see there is nothing to fear. Here we learn that among all the ranks a mage can earn in the magic tower, Grand Sorcerer is one of the highest. Only someone born with origin magic can receive it, and one kind is fate-revealing magic, which lets its user glimpse the world's destiny. Hernando is the only one who has it. That power lets him do all kinds of things, even win any game of chance. So weeks ago, when he was beaten in a game for the first time by none other than Yuri, he knew something strange was happening. No matter how much he tried, he could not read or predict his fate. Instead, he saw a strange vision of an adult, the protagonist, fighting with inhuman resolve that left him stunned. It was the resolve of someone who fully controls his own destiny. From that moment on, Hernando watched him carefully, and eventually decided Yuri had no fixed fate. His possibilities are endless, and the final choice rests only in his own hands. That is why, with all this in mind, Hernando refuses to worry over useless things. Right then, MC tells his opponent to stop waving his sword around and fight, making it clear that he is ready. The other boy signals he is ready too. So Fiora officially begins the trial by combat. Not even a second passes before Yuri charges and leaves the other boy frozen at his superhuman speed. What is even more impressive is that he uses his mana method without hesitation, so his opponent barely holds on and needs time to adjust to Yuri's style. Little by little, the fight evens out. But then things turn when the protagonist finally pulls back and proudly looks at the cut on his opponent's face while the boy stays on guard the whole time. Meanwhile, Fiore goes stiff and asks Hernando what he thinks the result will be. Hernando only pauses to think a little longer, then turns just in time to see the other boy strike back with a burst that finally lands on MC and draws a lot of blood. Even so, MC answers with the same force. So, Hernando has to admit he does not know. The king then asks if it is true. Hernando came to Briel guided by the gods, and the boy says yes, but there is no need to worry about him leaving, because he still has a lot of work to do there. Still uneasy, the king asks again whether anyone will be badly hurt, or whether something serious will happen in this fight. Hernando answers with a question of his own. Who does the king think is stronger? Without hesitating, Fury says Yuri is not on the other boy's level, at least not in pure strength. Hernando only partly agrees, thinking that he truly came to this kingdom because of signs from the heavens. They showed him that the strongest people on the continent and the one who could change the world's fate were here. All this time he thought that meant Fior, and since they were living in peace there was no reason to stay. But now with one look at Yuri he knows it is not time yet. Just then the other boy attacks, but instead of reacting as before he waits for him. He stays still for a moment, before fully activating his mana method and striking with the Founder's technique. He no longer needs to test the field. It is time to end the fight. He does it by rushing forward at superhuman speed until his blade rests against the enemy's neck. At once the poor boy is sure he is about to die. Everyone there thinks the same and freezes completely. But then Yuri stops. The other boy can only admit defeat. While everyone cheers, Hernando stands and thinks he came because of the heavenly signs. And now he has finally met the person who defies them every single day. In that moment, life became death and death became life. All because of the boy who changed his own fate, and Emma's with a single sword. Now Hernando understands that the person he was searching for was here all along. Yuri Briel, the one who rises beyond fate. After that, the story jumps ahead 5 full years. A maid with glasses runs through the halls of the Lav Palace, lost and mixed up about where she is supposed to be. Then she runs into Jack, the second prince, who asks what she is doing there. One look at him tells the girl he belongs to the royal family, which means she has to be very careful. From his age and attitude, she also knows he is neither the heir nor the youngest, but the middle son known for his sinister eyes and arrogant behavior. So she follows the advice her superiors gave her, and ignores him, which sadly only makes him even angrier. Luckily, she is saved by Yuri, whom she recognizes right away because he is well known and respected among the staff. He scares his brother off in an instant, and the girl gives him some cookies to thank him. What really matters now is that Yuri has not only grown older but stronger too. He has reached the soak state, which lets him use mana to reduce the strain on his hand, while holding a Yuri sword, making him faster and more agile. He is now 18, and it has been almost half a decade since he traveled back in time. That means the war with the Empire is closer than ever, and the peaceful days are about to end. That becomes even more clear when he reaches the meeting room door. No one hears him knock because they are too busy panicking and yelling at each other. So, he decides to help by covering his fist with mana, and then blasting the door open before finally walking in. As crazy as that seems, nobody is surprised, and that is how he joins the meeting, where everyone insists they have no troops available to send to the Allied forces, so they plan to ignore the Empire's request. They're supposed to be allies, but one noble insists others can handle it. The weapons and the soldiers. Yuri sees it as pure selfishness. They only care about themselves. This matters a lot, and it happened in his past life too, when the Empire sent a call to them and other nations to join a huge alliance and launch a major attack on the orcs in the east. The problem was it failed. The orcs crushed everything and pushed into every nation's borders. Worse, they attacked without touching the Empire first. That means the alliance was just a trap, the empire set up with the orcs. And the worst part is that they lost some of their best knights, including Liam, one of the men in this room. It crippled them. That's exactly why Yuri refuses to let it happen again. With the nobles still yelling, he tells them to be quiet and declares that he'll join the allied forces, and they need to do their part too. Nobles have a duty, and he won't let the name Ball be stained. His father just smiles. He knows it's a dangerous move, but an interesting one. After that, Yuri spends the whole afternoon training until Jack rushes in and asks why he's joining the Allied army. When as royalty, he has no reason to take that kind of risk. The protagonist answers that being royalty is exactly why he has to lead by example. Jack just tells him good luck out there. As for him, he'll stay behind and guard the palace or do anything that doesn't come with a big chance of dying. Then he leaves. MC asks his teacher if he's worried, but the man says he doubts MC will die so easily. He should make it back in one piece as long as he doesn't do anything stupid. Still, he needs to be careful. The orcs are nothing like human fighters. They're stronger and far more savage than they look. He also warns him to watch out for those who carry flags on their backs that marks them as orcs, the most brutal among the orcs. Yuri says he already has a plan, but he doesn't get to explain it because Emma shows up to announce a visitor with a very special package. So he heads to his office where Gory seems to be waiting for him. Or at least that's how it looks, because actually it's a new person named Gurmo, Lane's personal assistant. Since she's away on business, he came instead. Yuri immediately asks him to tell her to slow down. But it seems she can't go even one day without working, and she also couldn't miss the chance to send him her latest and most important gift, a chest full of decorative daggers called Elementarium. They look ordinary at first, but Yuri explains they're incredibly valuable because they're filled with ancient magic. You only need a little mana to make them move on their own. He gives a quick demonstration of what they can do and then notices something strange moving in the corner of the room. He doesn't pay it much mind and sends Gummo off, thanking him and saying he plans to use them in the Empire. The interesting part starts once they're alone, because then a voice says, "You can come out," revealing that the movement from before was Asana. In the end, she really did become an assassin working for Yuri. Without wasting time, she tells him she did exactly what he asked, and left a warning note on Goryo's bed so he'll know his place and stop messing with the kingdom's other merchants. She also asks if he's really going to join the mission against the orcs, warning him to be careful. Yuri makes it clear he won't be going alone. She'll secretly come with him and make sure everything goes right. Even though she's a deadly assassin, the girl blushes and says she'll always be there for him. A few days pass and then it's finally time to leave. Cedric sets his work aside to give Yuri a proper farewell. The protagonist promises he'll make the name Ball proud. After a few jokes, they hug and his father cuts in. That marks the start of the appointment ceremony, where he makes it clear Yuri is now responsible not just for his own life, but for every soldier from the kingdom on this mission. So he tells him that on the battlefield he has to remember all the precious lives resting on his shoulders. MC knows he can't promise everyone will come back unharmed, but he can at least make sure they don't die miserably like they did in the other timeline. When his father asks if he can do it, Yuri says yes. But before he can finish, Fior hits him with a crushing wave of killing intent, an aura so strong it leaves him frozen. Even though it's his own father, his body tells him on instinct that the thing in front of him is death itself. If he moves, he dies. If he does nothing, he dies. If he tries to dodge, he dies. No matter what, he dies. But unlike last time, now he can fight back. He activates his own mana technique and gathers enough strength to draw his sword and stop his father's attack. That was the final test before he could head to the battlefield. And Fiore congratulates him, saying this was his way of saying goodbye. Now he has only one thing left to say: come back alive. With that, it's Yuri's turn to speak. He steps in front of the crowd, introduces himself as he, the third prince of Fior, and tells them they can trust him. So now it's time to march. Then the scene shifts to what looks like an empty dungeon, but inside one of the cells an orc is being held captive, and in front of him stands the Count Sidor, eagerly waiting to meet the protagonist again. Speaking of him, the protagonist and the other Bull soldiers stop briefly to rest halfway through the trip. It seems like they still have a long way to go, but they're actually already near the border of Sidor territory. After that, they need to cross Gid to reach Balsac. A knight named Raymond, who knows the area well, says they're making great time, but then everything goes sideways when a voice behind him says in a dark tone that it was all his fault. It's Lauren, the first person Yuri saw die for him, and the last face he saw before being killed in his past life. The thing is, Lauren is very much alive right now, and he kneels in front of MC, introducing himself as the son of one of the main nobles. He also admits how much he admires him after hearing what he did in that fight 5 years ago. Yuri basically became his inspiration and the living example of the code every knight should follow. So, he's happy to serve him. The protagonist tries to keep himself together and gets saved by Raymond, who says it's time to move again. Then he warns MC that Count Sidar isn't known for being warm, so he shouldn't take it personally if they get a very cold welcome. Yuri already knows that, which is why everyone is shocked when they're greeted by a giant banner. It reads, "Welcome, third prince," and that's not all. All the knights in the area are waiting for them and giving him the highest honors. Among them is Count Cider himself, saying how much he to her admires Yuri for joining the front lines at such a young age. He also asks if he already has experience fighting orcs. The protagonist says, of course, then quickly realizes that in this life he doesn't. So he covers by saying he has studied a lot and has the support of troops who've seen battle many times. Surprisingly, that doesn't discourage Cider at all. If anything, he seems even happier and keeps smiling, saying he has a gift MC might like. Then he leads MC and a few of his closest men to a dark room. At first, everything seems normal until he locks it and Yuri panics, demanding to know what the hell he's trying to do. Completely calm, Cider tells them there's nothing to worry about, then lights the torches and reveals the orc. He explains they captured it to study the species and learn everything they can. Its habits, instincts, anything they can use against them. But now more than a prisoner, it's a gift for Yuri. The best way for him to practice and get ready for what's coming. He thanks him though. Inside, he thinks Subdor is even crazier than he expected. Still, the madman has a point. When one of the protagonist men looks like he might pass out from fear, Yuri asks what's wrong, and the soldier answers honestly. He says he never thought they'd go this far, and it feels like they're doing something horrible to a helpless prisoner of war. MC understands, and right then asks Sidor to open the cage and let the orc out so the boy can have a one-on-one fight. Even though he was terrified before, that actually calms him down. He stays on guard, waiting for the enemy to move first. Then, out of nowhere, the orc starts screaming and smashing its own face against the floor again and again, making it look like torture drove it insane. The boy turns away at once, saying he won't fight a defenseless prisoner. But not even a second later, the orc lunges from behind and slams his head with enough force that it would have killed him without the helmet. And it doesn't stop there. The orc grabs him hostage and everyone gets ready to fight, but Sidar tells them to relax. Its tendons were already cut, so it isn't the real danger. The real point is what this shows them. Yuri steps closer and tells the soldier that this is a brutal, smart, ruthless creature. What he's looking at is an orc. And to make that point even clearer, he calls for an enemy interpreter named Cory. Cory translates what the orc is saying. The creature demands that they lower their weapons right now, or it will break the hostages' bones one by one. Yuri simply tells Hernando to handle it, and he uses a strange spell that freezes the beast for a moment. He uses that opening to pull the boy to safety in seconds. Of course, the orc doesn't take it well and starts roaring, giving off a terrifying aura. Yuri realizes this is no normal orc, and Setor confirms it. When they found it, it was eating a knight alive. That alone is enough to make the protagonist men want to tear it apart. But MC orders everyone to stay calm because the other cells are full of more like it, all waiting for a chance to strike. And if this scares them, the battlefield will be even worse. So their job now is to use this training and learn how to kill orcs. With that, the drill begins. They face the creature while Hernando stays near Yuri and Kior to keep things from falling apart. As more orcs are brought out, the others attack one at a time. That way, every time they bring one down, the next rushes in. And if someone is about to get hurt, Yuri steps in, cutting them down with blades made from pure mana. Sadly, some of the boys only come away feeling how weak they really are. But Yuri reminds them this just raise their odds of staying alive a little longer. Tibor adds that keeping them locked up may be dirty, but those monsters deserve no mercy. When it's over, he asks them to follow him and see what the orcs are really doing. Then he shows them a cell packed with creatures far smaller and weaker. Half-orcs, the children of orcs and humans born from the people those beasts kidnap for their own amusement. The thought is so sickening that one of the boys nearly throws up, and Kador makes it clear he hates those creatures and will keep hating them until the day he dies. Yuri understands then that everyone in this world has their own worst enemy. For him, the greatest evil is the Empire. But for Kid, it's the orcs that wiped out his people and his own son. The next day, the Count asks Yuri to take Cory with them, revealing the boy is a half-orc who wants to help. He agrees and treats him like one of his own men. After that, they get ready to cross the border, a place known for unrest, partly because of the orcs, but mostly because of bandits. So they have to be ready because this is only the beginning. That becomes even clearer when the scene shifts and shows a small glimpse of the slaughter caused by the deadliest bandit in the area. Meanwhile, Yuri's group moves carefully, wondering how he'll keep things calm once the squad learns Cory is half-orcs. In the end, he decides to leave that to Hernando and asks Jared to scout ahead. Even though those areas belong to the bandits, and the first plan was to avoid them, Yuri now thinks it's better to find them so they can take care of two birds with one stone. Jared hesitates at first, but after a little praise, he gets right to work. Raymond notices that Yuri clearly values him, but the protagonist insists he only brought him along because he's useful. Then he asks why Ryman fights, which catches him off guard. He can't even remember the last time anyone asked him that. Still, he says the answer is both simple and hard. He fights for Briel's safety. That's enough for Yuri to decide he can leave Ryman in charge, while he joins Jared. That leads them to the bandits' camp where they manage to capture one of their scouts. The man admits he's a rookie who was sent out alone. But what really catches Yuri's eye is the necklace around his neck, a bright red crystal that a beginner like him should never be able to afford. Luckily, the boy is willing to talk. He says it was given to him by his boss, who strictly ordered them to wear it while on patrol. He doesn't know whether it has magic in it or anything else, so Yuri realizes he'll have to figure that out himself. So, he stays behind to watch the bandits from nearby while Jared moves the troops. Once Yuri is sure they've surrounded the place, he does what only someone as crazy as him would do, charge in head-on. He pushes straight into the center of the enemy camp and starts shouting while smashing everything in his path. He literally drags some poor guys out of their tents, and without a hint of doubt introduces himself as the man who's about to give them the beating of their lives. A while later, Jared and the others reach the camp, but they're too late. The only one still standing is Yuri, waiting calmly and explaining that everyone has been wiped out and there's plenty of meat left for them to steal so they can enjoy a solid meal before reaching the battlefield. The whole thing is so unreal that Jared doesn't even know whether to start eating. Then they find the bandit leader beaten so badly he barely matters anymore. And when he tries to get up, Yuri puts him back down. While Raymond explains that before they reach the Allied gathering point, they'll meet the army of the famous Holy Kingdom, known for using magic. MC wonders if they can count on their healing skills, but Ryban isn't sure because this time the commander will be the Holy Kingdom's own princess, caught in a fierce and very complicated power struggle. Rumor says she plans to use this war to prove herself, which makes her completely unpredictable. She'll do anything to bring her people home alive, even sacrifice anyone who gets in her way. That leaves Yuri thinking about what they should do. And even though Raymond suggests learning more first, he says he'll handle it the simplest way possible by talking to her himself. With that decided, they head to the independent region of GED, the last stop before Balzac. Its military laws are strict enough that even Allied soldiers could end up in jail for one mistake. While the others set camp outside, Yuri meets GED, who is formal and kind, promising support however he can. He also says his father made major gains against the orcs in his time, so he expects a lot from the protagonist. Things start turning MC's way when the Holy Kingdom's princess arrives at the palace and introduces herself as Sylvia, our saint. Like Yuri, she isn't the heir, she's the second princess. But that's where the similarities end. Seeing him seated there, she naturally asks if he's one of the Lord's vassals and tells him to leave the room so they can discuss important matters. Yuri says nothing, and though the Lord tries to fix the misunderstanding, things go bad fast when one of the woman's soldiers starts yelling at him for not standing before her highness. That's when the protagonist finally introduces himself as the third prince of Briel, freezing everyone in place and throwing the room into silence. He then explains that he's the one commanding these troops. He played Petit Briel, tells them not to worry about the mistake, and their apologies ease the tension. After that, the three of them sit down for tea and introduce themselves properly. Yuri points out they're about the same age and should be friends, mostly so they can drop the formal act before fighting side by side against the orcs. Though confused, she agrees, and that's when they start talking about what really matters. She explains that she came ahead of her army, and her troops should arrive tomorrow morning. Yuri says he hopes they make it in time and don't run into trouble. That confuses her. Does he doubt her people's loyalty? He says no. He means danger from outside, like the orcs taking a risk and crossing the border to ambush them. It sounds extreme, but it's not impossible. So while he doesn't question her soldiers' strength, he hopes they keep that in mind. Afterward, he meets with Hernando, who asks what the Holy Kingdom's paladins were like, and Yuri says they seem so tense that he has a bad feeling. Sylvia is going to have a hard time. Still, what matters now is the bandits' necklace, which they supposedly bought in Gold's main market, the capital of the bandits. It's said to attract orcs like some kind of drug. When the expert explains all that to the sellers, they tell him to bother someone else, insisting no such thing exists. They're about to head back to camp when they notice their men pouring into an illegal casino. So, Yuri and the others follow them inside to gamble a little, and of course put them in line. Elsewhere, Sylvia leaves the palace and meets with Fernando, the Holy Kingdom's vice commander, who quickly starts trashing Yuri, saying that sending that idiot to lead is proof that Bel is in decline. Right away, she says there's no need to judge him so soon, but the man keeps going, saying MC dresses like a random mercenary, and that after this war he'll return to Bel in a coffin. Fed up, Sylvia says that's enough, then follows his advice and asks whether there's any problem with the troops still on the way. He says everything is under control and she has nothing to worry about, all while wearing the exact face of someone she absolutely should worry about. Then he leaves to patrol and she's left feeling he doesn't respect her at all. After that, Fernando and his men arrive at the casino where the Baal soldiers are playing cards in peace, and he loses it, yelling that they should show more respect and that they're completely undisciplined. He treats the Allied forces like a joke and keeps ranting until someone grabs his shoulder. It's Yuri asking who he is and what the hell he's doing. Fedek recognizes him at once and jerks his hand away, then goes right back to complaining that this lazy attitude doesn't just hurt him, it hurts his men too. They should focus on swords, not cards, and they clearly don't understand real battle. Yuri just asks again who he is because no one gets to discipline a prince. That shuts the bastard up. And then right on cue, Sylvia shows up. She tells him he should be out patrolling, not picking fights. Then she orders him to leave immediately. That only makes it even clearer that Fennec looks down on her. She ignores it and apologizes to Yuri. He says he gets it. Keeping every subordinate under control isn't easy. The whole thing makes her so uneasy that she just walks away. That makes the protagonist remember what Raymond said. The princess has very little power in the Holy Kingdom's struggle for the throne, and people like Fennec prove it with their disrespect. Still, that's not his problem. So he tells the guys to get ready for the next round. At the same time, Fennec corners Sylvia and asks if she's become friends with the Prince of Briel. To him, Yuri is a common, unrefined man who will lead them straight to defeat in this war. But before Sylvia can answer, they're interrupted by a messenger soldier rushing in with urgent news from the main army. Right that second, they're under attack by orcs. Sylvia wastes no time and prepares to head into battle. But Lord Gott steps in and suggests asking the people of Bool for help. That's the best way to reduce losses for their men and the allied forces. It's the obvious choice, but Fennec answers for Sylvia, calling it nonsense. The Holy Kingdom will handle its own problems, just like always. He even asks if anyone really doubts they can beat a few lousy orcs. Worse, Sylvia seems to agree. She thanks him for the concern, but says they can handle it. So they just leave, and Lord Gott mutters that they're stubborn bastards. Even so, he can't let them die. So he asks his ally to go find Yuri and the troops of Bool. There's no time to lose, or this will turn into a massacre. A few minutes later, the protagonist gets the message, including the fact that Lord Gott personally asked them to step in. That shocks Raymond, because it's absurd that he had to give the order instead of the Holy Kingdom soldiers themselves. Of course, Yuri already knows why that happened. So he tells the few soldiers left in camp to get ready to move. Then he sends Gott's subordinate to gather the rest of the idiots who stayed behind drinking at the casino. Looks like it's time for a little night walk. After that, they head out and Yuri jokes with Jared that he looks pretty good for someone so drunk. Lauren takes the chance to say how impressed he is that MC not only forgave the bastards who insulted him, but also helped them without a second thought. That, he says, is what a real knight does. Yuri thanks him, but he can't stop thinking about how much the blonde has changed from his past life. It seemed crazy at first, but now he sees that if his actions can change big events, they can also change people directly. Still, all that fades away when they finally spot the Holy Kingdom forces fighting in the distance. Yuri tells everyone to listen up. This is their first battle against the orcs as one unit, so they need to stay together and remember that from now on, he'll be the first into battle and the last to leave. He refuses to lose anyone. So, while he covers himself in his horse and mana, he orders them to survive no matter what. But before we see him go all out, we jump back a few minutes to when Sylvia and her men still hadn't reached the battlefield. She admits she was careless, too confident, and too quick to ignore the protagonist warning about the dirty tricks the orcs might use. Then they finally see the battle ahead and realize the kingdom's troops are still holding on, so they rush forward. Sylvia orders Fennec to charge straight in, because the plan is to strike the enemy commander at once. Thankfully, he doesn't hesitate and leads his men into the attack while she activates her mana method, surging forward at incredible speed. The problem is that moving so fast keeps them from noticing the cursed skeleton waiting ahead. Once they're in range, it activates a magic circle that shatters the ground across the whole area, sending them straight into a trap they may not survive. In the middle of that panic, Sylvia starts remembering her life, especially the day her holy magic awakened when she was just a little girl. Everyone praised her, so she pushed herself to meet their hopes. She succeeded and even beat her brother in swordsmanship. But that became the worst mistake of her life. Once he saw how strong she was and what a threat she posed, her brother began pushing her away, sending her to the battlefield so she'd never reach the throne. Of course, what her brother and everyone at the palace really want is for her to die. Lying on the ground, unable to move, Sylvia understands again that the so-called honor they gave her was really a death sentence. That's why she's fought so hard to stay alive until now, and why she still has to live. So she gathers the last of her strength, forces herself up, and orders her men not to stop fighting. Then the nightmare gets worse. She feels liquid on her hands, but instead of blood, it's oil. When she looks up, dozens of orcs are surrounding them with torches. This wasn't just a trap, it was a giant furnace. Those bastards plan to burn them alive. A cruel but smart move that, along with the earlier ambush, proves they aren't facing ordinary enemies. These orcs have human intelligence and a demon's cruelty. Desperate, Sylvia looks for a way out, but there isn't one. She closes her eyes and waits for death, only to hear the protagonist's voice telling her to open her eyes. The next thing she sees is an orc's head flying through the air. Yuri asks if it was really so hard to ask for help and whether she's still in shape to keep fighting. Then he pulls her out of there. Sylvia admits she owes him one, but Yuri brushes it off. Meanwhile, his men wipe out the enemies, and Fennec walks up to apologize for how he acted earlier. He admits he'll never forget what he just did for them. Smiling, the protagonist accepts and says he only hopes they'll have his back when the time comes. The battle starts to feel more even, but everything changes when one of the orcs signals a retreat. The bastards decide to pull back now. That dirty tricks won't finish the job. Yuri immediately orders his men not to let them escape and starts chasing them. Then one of the orcs stays behind to block their path. It's an orc Val, exactly the kind of enemy MC is supposed to avoid. Prince the 1, 00100 freezes for a moment, almost looking weak. but when the orc Val fires a mana-charged arrow, the protagonist stops it with nothing but his sword, making it clear this fight isn't over and that he's ready to answer the challenge with everything he has. Still, he's not about to stand there and wait for the orc Val to move first. With the enemy still in sight, he activates his mana method and charges in alone. Seeing that one of the stronger orcs tries to stop him by throwing a spear so fast that it reaches the protagonist's face in an instant, almost hitting him, almost as the key word, because Yuri remembers one of the most important lessons his teacher gave him. Normally, you train to react to the unexpected, but his mana method lets him instantly sense everything around him and naturally find the best move in any situation. Put simply, the Founder's technique guides him not just away from danger, but toward the fastest, cleanest way to bring down an enemy. Even simpler, it's basically a kind of spider sense, and back in the present, that lets him dodge the spear, even though it's only millimeters away from his face. His body also moves on its own, as he wipes out a whole group of orcs in one motion. But the fight is only starting now that they see him as the biggest threat. The others rush him in waves of 3. Normally, he'd be at every disadvantage, and only an idiot would try to face them head-on. The difference now is that he's using his ability better than ever, and it's been so long since his last real battle that he's not about to waste this chance. Out of nowhere, he can even see the exact lines where his blade should fall to kill each enemy, the best possible path for his sword. So, he doesn't hesitate and attacks, taking down every orc foolish enough to challenge him. Even so, Yuri notices he's slowing down. His body still can't keep up with his mind. But it doesn't matter, because when he finally looks around, almost all the orcs have already been defeated, and the only one left is only Orc Val is still standing, and he challenges him by throwing his spear the same way he did before. Of course, Orc Val blocks it, and acts cocky when Yuri provokes him, but the protagonist just smiles. The throw was never meant for him, it was aimed at something right behind him. Then Orc Val's banner falls. The surviving orcs can't believe it and freeze when they realize someone has appeared who can stand against their leader. They stop running and stop fighting, too stunned to know what to do. The allied troops seize the chance and start their attack. In the middle of it, Sylvia asks Yuri if he's okay. Grinning, he says he could be better. Then he watches his men take control, killing some, driving off the rest, and winning the battle for good. After that, he asks how her first victory with the allied forces feels. Sylvia admits it feels really good, and she thanks him right away. If they're alive, it's because of him. Meanwhile, the scene shifts, and we learn Orc Val was one of the few who escaped. He explodes with rage over the defeat, making it clear he plans to get revenge. Back in Gita, Herod quickly gathers the few rookies left in the tavern and excitedly tells them every last detail of the battle. They're shocked since they thought Yuri wasn't actually that strong and was just a lazy prince wasting the crown's money on gambling. Lauren immediately jumps in to defend her husband, saying that's all nonsense with no proof. Half drunk, maybe from beer, maybe from pure devotion, she insists he's the strongest in the royal line, and says she has plenty of reasons to prove it. What they don't know is that besides the curious people stopping to listen, a Santa is also watching. To her, Yuri clearly isn't some ordinary noble. He trusted her killing talent before it was even fully developed, and no matter the situation, he always seems several steps ahead. Sometimes it almost feels like he can see the future. But the important part comes when she tells the innkeeper she's looking for someone with dark brown hair who always carries a sword at his waist. The most noticeable detail is that he doesn't speak the continental language very well, so he probably has an accent. After thinking for a moment, the innkeeper says he does remember someone with a strange accent who ordered risotto with no spices at all, and asked how to get to Balsac. For Sarah, that's more than enough, so she thanks him with a silver coin. Sure that the person she's after is heading to the Allied Forces meeting point, the same place Yuri is going. That means she'll have to move ahead and find him first, because he's the next piece in MC's game, the swordsman of the East, one of the 10 strongest people on the continent. As for him, the next day, they keep moving. Using the Holy Kingdom's methods as an example, they set traps and barriers before camping for the night. Everyone works so fast that Yuri thanks Raymond for teaching them that kind of work. After that, he goes to watch the area, trying to picture every possible ambush. But then he runs into something awful. Corey getting beaten by his own allies who call him a spy and harass him so badly that Yuri steps in and orders them to leave before he does something he'll regret. In the end, the only one left is Corey, who thanks him and asks him not to be too harsh on them since he understands at least a little why they hate him. He adds that if the protagonist steps in over something this small, it'll only push him farther from his dream. That catches the protagonist's attention, and Corey admits that what he wants most is to do good work so that one day he can live among humans. MC knows that won't be easy because the only reason Corey is allowed to stay with the soldiers is his role as a translator. Once the mission ends, his future will be completely uncertain. Even so, Yuri doesn't crush his hopes. Instead, he tells him to stay close to Arnando and learn magic because he'll need some kind of skill if he wants to live among people. After that, the two of them head back to the finished camp, and Yuri meets with Raymond, Jared, and Arnando to rule out every possible way they could be ambushed. Jared thinks he's overdoing it, but he insists it's the bare minimum. They're in orc territory, and the odds of an attack are high. So high, in fact, that right then, a messenger rushes into the tent, shouting that they're under attack. When they run out, they face the worst-case scenario, a direct assault with firebombs, and even worse, dark mana techniques, also called witchcraft. After looking over the situation, Arnando says they probably don't have an actual witch in their ranks. They're likely using pre-made witchcraft bombs, so they need to stop whoever is throwing them. Yuri stays calm and orders the lines to spread out while he goes after the mastermind himself. Without wasting a second, he asks Arnando which direction the sorcery is coming from, and Arnando points east. So Yuri wraps his crow in mana to boost its power and sprints off at full speed. Then he spots a patched red flag tied to the sword of Orc Valet, and that's when he realizes it's the same Orc Valet from before, clearly back for revenge. Yuri gives it to him, charging straight in with an attack that sadly gets blocked by the giant, who then fires back with a brutal flurry of blows that force Yuri to retreat. Once they both pause for breath, he notices his right arm shaking from the strain. Fear starts creeping in because the enemy's moves aren't those of a normal orc, not even an orc Vale. He fights like a commander with huge battle experience. The protagonist doesn't like how this is going, but he has to keep fighting, and he decides the best move is to widen the gap between them. So, he uses the enemy's non-stop attacks to dodge and pull back bit by bit. At first glance, it looks like Orc Valet controls the whole fight, but his desperation is nothing like Yuri's calm. After blocking another strike, MC attacks with a blow stronger than all his earlier tries combined. Once Orcval realizes he is on a completely different level, he activates his own mana method and charges again with everything he has, ready to test what that huge Cowson's bastard can really do. Too bad he should have thought harder about that, because out of nowhere, Orcvalk reveals his own trump card, awakening a kind of mana Yuri has never seen before. He can't tell if it's witchcraft, but he can feel an absurdly dark energy pouring from it, heavy enough to be terrifying. The protagonist is clearly shocked because orcs aren't supposed to control mana, but since Hernando confirmed there was a spellcaster around, and the enemy has already shown they can make complex plans, he realizes he was foolish not to consider it. Still, instead of panicking, he gets excited and grins at the challenge of fighting one of the strongest orcs in the enemy army. That also means he has to go all out, so he uses soul separation. At once, it reveals a bunch of lines across Orcvalk's body. They're blurry because he'll be hard to hit, but they all meet at one spot, his left eye. Orcvalk attacks again, but now Yuri knows exactly what to do. He follows the path of the sword until his blade drives into the move that should have won him the fight. Except the monster is so strong, he grabs the sword with his hand and pushes it away like it was nothing. As for the wound on his neck, he had already reinforced it with mana to reduce the damage. Seeing Yuri's shock, he just mocks him, acting like he's already won. Luckily, MC doesn't hesitate. He powers up his sword and yanks it free, cutting off several fingers. Orcvalk answers with an axe strike straight into Yuri's shoulder, and instead of just drawing blood, it pulls out a smile. He knows weak attacks won't be enough to bring this bastard down. And with no time or strength to waste, he takes his stance again. Orcvalk meets him with the same intensity until they both strike and collide, causing a huge explosion of pure mana that can be seen from miles away. Seconds later, the blast fades, leaving a crater in the ground, surrounded by the remains of a weapon. Luckily, it's clear that the broken weapon belongs to Orcvalk, who drops to the ground under Yuri's cold stare. The protagonist doesn't waste even a second before going for the final blow. With one stab straight through the chest, he beats him, but even that isn't enough to kill him. Lying in a pool of blood, the warrior still tries to move, still tries to attack. At first, Yuri thinks he should finish him. But then he remembers this orc probably knows more than any ordinary one, so killing him would be a waste. Just then, Jared and the others arrive and ask if he's okay. But MC only cares about the camp, and he relaxes only when Jared confirms everyone is safe. So Yuri orders the survivors to be gathered, including the one he just defeated because he has plenty of questions for him. With that decided, once things calm down and the camp is set up again, Fernando treats his wounds while teasing him a little, saying even someone like him can have a rough time in battle. Of course, it's nothing too serious, and Yuri is good as new. So before he can start the interrogation, he has them bring over a large, flashy, and pretty ridiculous throne, insisting that a commander like him should sit on something majestic. One of the soldiers even offered to build it just for him. At first, Yuri looks horrified, but he still can't help smiling. He's even a little excited by the idea of earning real respect. So, since turning it down would be rude, he sits and admires the fancy work on the throne before announcing that the prisoner interrogation is now officially starting. That's when it hits them. The surviving orcs have been watching the whole time, staring at him with pure hatred, and of course they refuse to say anything. So, the torture begins. They burn the face of anyone who refuses to answer every question. That's why Yuri warns them they'll get only one chance to answer with the truth, then asks who ordered the night ambush. The Orsi question starts yelling a stream of curses, and before Corey can even translate, everyone already knows it's all insults. Without hesitating, Yuri signals Jared. The playful look vanishes from his face as he turns serious, grabs the rope tied around the orc's neck, and shoves his head into the fire. The screams echo through the whole forest, and even though it's an orc, the sight is so brutal that everyone freezes. Still, no one steps in, and the orc keeps twisting on the ground while the flames spread over his body. Once again, Yuri warns the rest he'll ask each of them only once, and their answer will decide whether he ends their pain or not. Then he grabs one of the mana-filled daggers and drives it into the orc's heart, killing him in seconds. He tells Jared to move the body so they can keep going. Then another prisoner suddenly speaks up, saying they know nothing because they're just soldiers, but the order to break off and attack them came from Rukvalk. So Yuri should spare the Eidben others and punish that bastard instead. The protagonist laughs at once, not because of the betrayal, but because he knows it isn't that simple. So he gets more direct, asking if the attack was ordered by someone named Akua. The name means nothing to Yuri's men, and they glance at each other in total confusion. What they don't know is that Okua is the name of the famous orc king, a monster so strong he was the main reason the alliance was formed and the one who wiped out most of Briel's knights and MC's past life. If they want to end this war, he's the one they have to kill. At that point, Rukvalk asks if he'll be spared if he answers honestly. He tells him yes, but that isn't enough. He wants an oath, basically an unbreakable pact, where both sides put their honor on the line. Yuri is surprised, because that's not what he'd expect from an orc. But then Herod panics, saying there's no way they can let a threat like that go free. Even so, the protagonist insists he has everything under control. Then Orville confirms the order came from his tribal leader, but the original idea was Oku. What he doesn't know is how they got exact details about the alliance's route, only that Okua found them and sent forces to intercept. It's so strange that even Harid steps in, pointing out how suspicious the timing is. Worse, that could also explain the ambush on the Holy Kingdom's troops. But Yuri still has one last question. Just how strong is Okua? And at that, Orville smiles and basically laughs in his face, making it clear they're in trouble. Not even a dozen Orvoks like him would stand a chance against Okua, who is stronger and faster than anyone else in that world. Yuri doesn't deny how terrifying that sounds, but humans are far more cunning, and that becomes obvious when he brings out the red crystal from earlier. Instantly, Orville jumps up and snaps his restraints like he's desperate to take it. Then he lunges at Yuri, breaking their agreement on the spot. MC doesn't even move. He already has him surrounded, telling him that for someone who talks about honor, he doesn't deserve it. He had planned to respect the oath, but now it's clear he doesn't deserve that mercy. So Yuri orders him killed. After that, once they finish him off, and the rest of the orcs too, they finally get a chance to truly set the camp in order, starting with treating all the wounded. The priest of German takes charge. But then Hernando arrives to help, followed by Cory, who keeps bringing bucket after bucket of water for him to purify, turning it into holy water that's not only blessed but also heals. That's why he asks Cory to help by pouring some over everyone's wounds. Cory obeys right away, amazed to see how just a few seconds of that man's magic can change people's faces from deep pain to pure relief. That's when he finally understands Yuri's advice. This could be his path. He could use magic to help people. After that, they keep working until dawn. And while German thanks only the mage, Hernando makes sure not to ignore Cory's effort, saying he deserves credit too. Sadly, seeing the damage from an ambush that wasn't even part of the main battle leaves German with a terrible feeling. Hernando argues it may not be as bad as he thinks and tells him to look around because even after such a dangerous fight, everyone survived and they're helping each other. Some care for the wounded while others lift spirits. Fernando decides to do his part too, sending a beam of energy into the sky and filling it with northern lights, which brings smiles to everyone there, including Cory, who uses the moment to look at him, hopefully, and ask if he'll please teach him magic. That catches Hernando off guard, and he admits it's been a long time since he heard that. Then he asks why Cory wants to learn magic, and Cory confesses that now he understands magic can make people smile, and that's what he most wants for his future. After thinking it over, Hernando says a half-orc who can use magic sounds pretty amazing, making it clear he's more than willing to take him on as an apprentice. But the important part comes later, because just as they're ready to move out again, several knights from the Empire arrive to meet them, and ask to speak with Yuri before the official Balasok Alliance meeting. From the protagonist reaction, it seems he already expected this, and he welcomes an Imperial knight named Raoul. He introduces himself politely, explaining that he's part of the advanced force and his team already reached Balzac. But since they found groups of orcs nearby, they came to warn them, so they wouldn't be caught off guard. Yuri thanks him and asks who the knight behind him is. The man apologizes for not introducing himself properly, saying he's not exactly in the most honorable place in his career right now. Whatever that means, MC recognizes him and finds it ironic that they meet again like this, especially since he represents the darkest moment of Yuri's past. Then the knight gives his name, Graham, the same man who spared him in his other life and let him escape even though he had no reason to do it. Graham explains that he recently lost his title, but the protagonist couldn't care less and says it's still a pleasure. Then asks if that means he's fighting in this war without any title or rank. Embarrassed, Graham admits that he is. And then Ryu cuts in saying Graham did nothing wrong. His only mistake was having the wrong mentor. Even so, that's nowhere near enough reason to ignore everything he's done for the Empire over the years. Yuri doesn't say it out loud, but he agrees completely, seeing Graham as the most fair and honorable man he's ever met. So he simply says he's heard great things about him and asks whether he'd like a change, offering him a place in Bool's ranks. In his heart, MC knows that even though he hates the Empire's knights, Graham is different. He knows Graham likely paid a heavy price for letting him go, and he wants to repay that in this life. The problem is, without even thinking it over, Graham refuses. Yuri says that's fine. Part of him expected that answer. In the end, they continue on as planned until they reach the city of Balzac, which is much bigger than he imagined, and surrounded by an incredibly tall wall that must have been built by the most talented mages around. What matters is that as soon as they enter, Hernando warns them to be careful because the place is full of powerful people who would swallow him alive for fun. Yuri assumes he means the Duke, picturing one of those bitter old men he has to deal with sometimes. That's why the real surprise comes when he meets the Duchess, a redhead named Morose, who is not only strikingly beautiful but also kind, greeting Yuri with great respect. When he explains that he's in charge of Belle's troops, she even starts flirting, asking how old he is. Yuri says he just turned 18, and she quickly says that's perfect since she's only 4 years older. Her flirting keeps getting bolder. At that point, the protagonist finally understands what this is. She's beautiful, but she's also clever, and she knows how to use that to sway people. Sadly, MC has too much bad history with that kind of manipulation. It doesn't matter whether her intentions are good or bad. He just can't see her in a positive way. So he tells her age doesn't matter. If two people share the same values, they can be friends no matter their background, age, or gender. It's basically a polite way of asking her to drop the silly games, and she takes the hint well before moving on with the formalities. She introduces Yuri to Bruce's allies, the men who will soon fight beside them. Then she says they should get to know each other before the battle, which makes Hernando hope she's just overly friendly. Meanwhile, Herod asks where the hell Brucen even is on the map, and Yuri explains it's a small country near the sea, known for being tough and steady. Right then, the commander leading Bruce's troops walks over and offers him a bottle of wine. He introduces himself as Jonathan and quickly pours him a glass, but Yuri bluntly asks if that's really wine, something that refined doesn't seem like it came from a plain place like Brucen. Of course, the polite smiles from earlier vanish right away, replaced by dark looks, and one of Jonathan's men almost lunges at him. Jonathan stops him, tells him to calm down, and asks Yuri if that was supposed to be a joke or an insult. He clearly wants to avoid a fight, but the protagonist doesn't back off. He asks what he'd do if it was an insult. Jonathan says I should apologize for it. Still, he adds that maybe an apology isn't needed since his attitude can only mean two things. Either he's the jerk the rumors describe, or he's testing them to see if they're truly worthy of an alliance. That's when Yuri realizes Jonathan is sharp. He stands and says there's nothing more dangerous than an ally you can't trust on the battlefield. So, yes, he wants proof they can be relied on. Jonathan answers that a knight can only prove his worth with a sword, and that's exactly the opening wanted. She tells them to follow her to the training grounds. Of course, Yuri and Jonathan won't fight each other directly. Instead, they each send chosen subordinates. The first is Laurent, the one who almost hit the protagonist for being reckless. From the stands, Mero says MC may have been rude, but she doesn't mind if it gives her something fun to watch. He tells her not to bother hiding it. He already knows she expected this and planned it from the start. Either way, the match works for him too, since he wants a closer look at Bruce's men. He knows one of them will eventually become one of the 10 strongest on the continent, just like his father. Sadly, he can't remember which one it is. So, as the first match begins, he hopes to figure it out. Across the continent, people say the title of the 10 strongest is like a mark of honor given to warriors who rise above everyone else, making them almost untouchable in national conflicts and wars between kingdoms. Their power is such a huge threat that it can decide whether a war starts at all. And Yuri knows he needs to build ties with people who have that kind of future. In general, there's no better way for men to start a friendship than with a solid fight, so he watches Luren take his stance. His opponent Prin mocks him, saying he's probably just some noble who built his name through family status and a few fancy tournament wins. He assumes Rain has never seen a real battlefield, so he charges in with total confidence, not expecting Rain to meet him with a cold stare and dodge everything with textbook precision. Yuri can tell Lorraine's style has no clear flaws, even if it doesn't look flashy. So he's sure Lorraine will win if this keeps going until something happens that leaves Mero speechless and makes Jonathan jump to his feet. The only one not surprised is Yuri, who admits he expected it. He already knew Laurent would overwhelm his opponent with just 2 moves, pinning him down with the tip of his sword at his throat. It happened so fast the dust still hadn't settled, and the protagonist gets excited because Laurent usually never leaves an opening. This time he did, showing weak points on purpose. His opponent took the bait and went straight for the shoulder, but that only triggered the trap. Lorraine turned his wrist to kill the force behind the strike, shifted his balance inward at the perfect moment, then redirected the attack while turning it into his next move, landing a perfect cut to the neck. Even so, Yuri admits Bruce's knight didn't fight badly. He probably could have won if he hadn't gotten overconfident, letting Laurent read him like an open book and build a brutally clean attack line. Proning can only laugh, admit he lost fair and square, and offer his hand in respect for Laurent's skill. The best part is that knights from both sides cheer and applaud the match. Jonathan praises MC for the talent of his men, and MC answers that Jonathan's fighter wasn't bad either. He better not back out now, though there are still plenty of men left to fight. Jonathan's answer is immediate when he calls for a man named Jose to represent them in the next round. Jose steps into the arena without a second of hesitation, carrying a massive build and an absurdly huge sword that most people couldn't even lift. With a proud grin, Jonathan says Jose is the strongest in the unit and is bound to become the strongest in all Brucen. Yuri just smiles, thinking, bingo. Then he sends Jared to handle him. For a moment, Jared hesitates, so he yells at him to stop being a coward and get moving. Jared steps up until he's face to face with Jose, or more like face to chest, because Bruce's knight is enormous. Even though Jose acts friendly, Jared starts breaking into a cold sweat. He can tell that's the face of a man who will do anything to win. Jose notices Jared sizing up his strength, so he decides to give him a sample by throwing a direct strike with the full weight of that sword. Jared almost tries to block it, then thinks better of it and dodges, knowing a hit like that might kill him. From there, the fight turns into a hunt with Jared, doing everything he can to stay away from the giant, but Jose never gives him room to breathe. He keeps the pressure on while Yuri thinks his strength is like an orc's with the skill of a swordmaster. He also wastes no energy on useless moves, which shows real intelligence too. That kind of mix could easily make him one of the strongest men alive someday. Then Jose lifts Jared up like a sack of potatoes and slams him into the ground to win the match. They quickly help Jared back up and praise him for lasting that long. In the end, the poor guy even thanks Jose for teaching him a few things the hard way. Yuri then announces that the score is now 1-1, enough for both sides to see each other's potential. Morose asks if that means they're done getting acquainted. Yuri says yes, and then she steps closer in a very seductive way, saying it's unfair because he still hasn't done anything to get to know her. For a moment, it almost looks like her charm might actually have worked on him for once. But then Yuri shoots her a hard glare, and she instantly gets the message to back off. Luckily, Jonathan breaks the tension by reminding them he promised to show them his office, and says they should go now because he's dying of curiosity. That saves them from an awkward mess. But just as the three of them are about to leave, Yuri makes up an excuse that he needs to check on his men and rushes off, leaving her more frustrated than ever. As time passes, the rest of the Allied forces finish arriving in Balzok. To everyone's surprise, that even includes the Empire's supreme commander. So during the first few days, every army spends its time sizing up the others. Everyone except Briel's troops, Yuri orders them to focus only on training, which makes Hernando a little uneasy because by then the other commanders have already started meeting to plan strategies and build alliances. Yuri understands the concern but says those are just weak half-alliances. This war has gathered the strongest fighters from each nation in one place against an enemy they're underestimating. So all anyone really cares about is proving they're better than everyone else. In the end, the best thing they can do is show their strength in battle, and for that, they need more training. So he proposes a small duel between his own men. And the first to step forward is Lauren. He walks up confidently and says he wouldn't dare insult Yuri by underestimating him. With that, they both take their stances and Lauren activates his mana method, giving off a clean, stable energy, even brighter than the protagonists. Yuri admits Lauren is an excellent training partner. And then Lauren comes at him hard. MC blocks the first strike, but it's followed by a storm of attacks, fast and scarily precise. Yuri keeps dodging, but he can tell the sword path is so perfect that sooner or later he'll slip, while Lauren will keep that same flawless level. It makes him remember the moment the blonde killed him in the past, how even like a walking corpse under someone else's control, that cut was still perfectly accurate. He realizes Lauren may go even farther in this life. So Yuri wants to be worthy of leading him to victory and a great future for the kingdom, and worthy of facing him head-on. With that thought, he throws a powerful strike that kicks up sand, and forces Lauren to pull back for a few seconds before charging in again, as if his life depends on it. And that brief pause gives the protagonist just enough time to brace himself. He takes the hit with a confident grin that sets the crowd off in excitement. Jared thinks they are both ridiculous. There is no reason for a simple sparring match to get this savage. Then a voice behind him says the Prince of Briel has incredible skill. When he turns around, he is met by the shadow of Jonas, greeting him like an old friend. A second later, Jonas starts yelling for Yuri, saying he wants to fight too. MC immediately says that is fine, and promises him an unforgettable duel against Jared, which is not what Jonas meant at all. Still, he goes with it and drags poor Jared off to a clearer spot so they can have their fun. With their match over, Lauren thanks him, and he says he is already looking forward to the next one. Then he walks over to a tree nearby and asks if there has been any progress. He is not talking to himself, but to Asuna, who praises how much his skills have improved. She adds that her search for that outsider is going well. She even tracked him here to Belzak. Yuri knows exactly who she means. One of the strongest men on the continent, and the only person in his past life who stood against Okwa and dared to fight that monster alone. Back then, the protagonist protagonist never learned why he hated Oka enough to risk his life like that. But he knows he will need him to win this war. So he tells Asa to hurry. He cannot afford to wait because if things go like last time, that man will be devoured, leaving an empty place among the 10 strongest. Later, Yuri attends a strategy meeting led by the Emperor's half-brother and current supreme commander of the Allied forces. Ragnar, an imposing man MC remembers from his past life. It happened back when he was still seeing Trina. The two of them were kissing in an unused room in the palace when she asked him to be more careful so they would not get caught. Yuri insisted no one was around and said that no matter what happened, he would take responsibility. The problem was that just as they were about to kiss again, Ragnar spoke up and told them to stop talking and find a room that was actually empty. He did not care that they were together, but he did ask Yuri if he truly cared about his niece. When he said yes, Ragnar brushed the whole thing aside and trusted them to handle it themselves. Even from that brief meeting, the protagonist could tell he was a deep person, which makes him wonder why the hell he is making everyone wait so long. Now, one of the representatives says they do not mind waiting since this is the perfect chance to connect with the Imperial family. The one who answers is Ragnar himself. He suddenly appears behind them without anyone sensing him, which puts Yuri on edge. Ragnar takes his seat and warns them not to get comfortable. To make the point even clearer, he activates his mana method and releases a crushing pressure that nearly drops them on the spot as he says he hates cowards. His energy is so overwhelming that even Graham looks like he might collapse. Yuri cannot help thinking it is one hell of an entrance. At last, Ragnar says he will personally kill anyone who tries to run. But aside from that, they will all be treated like knights. That means rewards based on results. And knowing Ragnar values trust, MC is the first to raise his hand and ask how the Empire rates the orc's strength, introducing himself first as Yuri, the one in charge of Bool. Ragnar smiles right away and says he has heard a lot about him from Prince Jorge. He then reveals new information about the orcs. Someone named OK united the 3 great tribes into one. That of course makes the mission much harder. They have also confirmed an enemy camp near Balzac, so the first battle will begin in 1 day. The problem is that he needs a volunteer for the vanguard, and he does not hesitate to ask Yuri if he can leave that role to him. With little room to refuse, he accepts. That night, he spends some time resting by the fire until Fury joins him and congratulates him on getting the vanguard. It is dangerous, but it is also a highly respected post. Everyone wanted it, which makes her wonder how someone who does not look all that impressive managed to secure it. Her curiosity about him keeps growing. She admits she may seem annoying, but her people's lives are on the line, so she needs to know exactly who she is dealing with. If she is going to trust him, he has to answer honestly and open up. And if she likes what she hears, she might even help him in battle. Yuri asks how, and Fiore reminds him she is known as the Mage Duchess for a reason. She has her tricks and says she is far more useful than Hernando in combat. In the end, the protagonist admits the first battle will bring heavy losses, and the vanguard is deadly in any war, so he cannot stop worrying about his men. The soldiers eating, laughing, and talking right now have no idea that they could soon be nothing but cold corpses because he selfishly chose to accept the vanguard. He is not trying to sound emotional or ask for pity over something he cannot change. He just wants to carry that burden the right way. Those words leave Fiore completely moved. She stands up and steps closer to him, admitting that even though she still does not like that, he cannot see her as a woman. She will help him in this first battle so they can challenge fate together. Yuri takes her hand and seals the deal. After that, the first day of the war between the orcs and the allied forces begins with both sides getting ready for the fight. Yuri tells his men to stay sharp. The tension is so heavy that everything falls into deep silence until Ragnar breaks it, saying it is almost time for the vanguard to move. So he does not understand why Fiore is out here instead of at her post. She simply says she was asked to help and could not refuse. She came to do the Prince of Briel a small favor. Then the signal is finally given to advance. Yuri asks his men if they are ready, and they charge into battle, running straight into a solid wall of orcs already waiting to tear them apart. What stands out most is that Yuri is not just leading his troops himself. He is the one at the very front. It is brave but reckless enough to get him killed. What he does not know is that someone even stronger is covering him, and that is when Fiore raises her staff. She says this is exactly what she came to do, then creates a massive fireball in seconds big enough to cover nearly all of them, and hurls it without mercy at the enemy army. The problem is that only a few meters separate the orcs from Yuri, and Ragnar warns that at this rate the allied troops will burn too. But the redhead tells him not to worry. That is exactly what Prince the 1100th wanted. From a distance they watch him use that surprise opening to leap onto the orcs, cutting them down so fast they do not even know what hit them. Then the flames reach him, but he does not panic. He pulls out one of the daggers seen earlier and summons a wall of water to shield his men while the orcs are burned to ash. So even after the personal hell Fury unleashes on the battlefield, Briel's men are still standing, using the water for cover and the steam to strike by surprise, while the enemy can do nothing about it. And Yuri not only guards his men's backs, but also uses the magic in his daggers to throw them at his enemies, kill them, and have the blades fly back into his hands in time for the next target. And when that is not enough, his guys step in to protect him in seconds. Along with the soldiers of Briel, Jonas is also in the vanguard, and he says this is exactly what he expected from the famous land of knights, before jumping off his horse and sweeping through orcs with his huge sword. On the other side, the Holy Kingdom's troops join in too, and Sylvia orders them to protect Bel's knights at all costs. She announces that the enemy formation is breaking apart, and Ra can only watch in surprise. Knowing the vanguard is usually a brutal place where men go in ready to die, but having Yuri at the front sends everyone's morale soaring. On top of that, asking the Mage Duchess for help worked perfectly, even if it looked foolish at first. Fior admits she originally refused a plan like that, but the bastard talked her into it, and just proved he is not as crazy as he looks. More than that, she has a feeling he can turn around any bad situation, which is exactly what the Allied forces needed in their first battle. And yes, the clash ends in a crushing victory for humanity. That night, while writing her report on what happened, Fior admits it was all thanks to the Prince of Bool, but that still does not give him the right to walk into her room without permission. And before you think this story is getting spicy, Fiore is actually talking about Hernando, who teleports in beside her and says she should treat her old master better. The redhead fires back that no real teacher would abandon a student the way he did years ago. Things get interesting when he says he came to check her progress on one matter, the research she has been doing on the Transcendent Interpretation Formula, a spell made to connect messages so their meaning can be understood. At first it does not seem related to Hernando's goals at all. But he says he wants updates to understand Yuri's fate, which leaves Fiore stunned. She warns him that a grand mage like him should not meddle in human history. Hernando already knows that. Still, he says more and more people are getting tangled up in the protagonist fate, including the Empire's commander. Then the scene shifts and Yuri gets summoned by Ragna, who gives him a new recon mission. Of course, MC can hardly believe it, and the blonde explains that tomorrow's plan is to push into the eastern plains, which are deep inside Orkland. They expect constant ambushes, and the army will have to move under crushing pressure. From that alone, Yuri figures out his job: operate as a separate unit, scout the area, and protect the Alliance's main formation. Even so, he points out that Bril's troops already took the vanguard last time, so someone else should get a chance to stand out. The problem is that Ragna only trusts skills he's seen for himself, so he would rather keep Bree up front. Yuri just smiles and offers another idea that could satisfy everyone. Naturally, he leaves them hanging, but a few minutes later the commanders get a notice. The army will march at dawn, and they'll receive support from a recon unit chosen not by the usual method, but through a contest between the armies of the allied nations. It sounds insane, but he is basically saying he won't let mediocre troops take one of the most important roles. That gets everyone fired up, because the contest will be an orc hunt. They have to kill orcs and cut off their right ears. The total number will decide where each nation stands in future battles. Right away, Hernando knows the protagonist suggested it, and the protagonist admits it, saying this will be the perfect way to test what each nation can really do. Then Jared reminds him that recon work is not one of Bel's strengths. MC tells him not to worry. He already has a foolproof plan. So the next day, Ragna goes over the mission again. The main force will move as planned while select groups from each nation scout the area and hunt as many orcs as they can. There's also a time limit, so after flipping the hourglass he announces the contest has begun. As Yuri, Sylvia, and Jonathan head out, Ragna can't hide a smile. One of his men points out that he seems to trust the Prince of Briel. Ragna admits he is still young, but he can't deny the boy has caught his attention. If he gets good results again, Ragna might really start to value him, and Yuri is sure he will. He calms Jared down, saying that for now, they just need to focus on finding the orcs. Of course, Jared says, finding them won't be enough, but the protagonist stays calm, repeating that he knows how to win. Soon they spot an orc cavalry unit, so they move toward them and show off the famous red gem necklace. The wild part is that the effect is instant. The creatures turn toward it like they found prey while Yuri waits in place and tells the others to go all out, but not too far. They need to keep those ears intact. With that, the slaughter starts, and it quickly becomes clear that the necklace doesn't just make the orcs more violent, it also makes them stupid. So even though they're still savage, the group can handle them without much trouble. Then things change when an Orbal joins the enemy force with a presence even more terrifying than the last one Yuri killed. Even so, he doesn't flinch. He keeps moving and takes its head off in one swing. In just a few minutes, they wipe out the whole group. Yuri had prepared two things for this mission: the bandit's necklace and his magic daggers, which aren't just for long-range attacks. They have more tricks, including this one. Out of nowhere, he stabs one into the ground, creating a kind of energy around them, and that gives him the confidence to say that before they head back, they'll wipe out every orc in the area. Bit by bit, we learn that this energy is just one part of soul separation. A unique mana method with the power to shape things according to the user's will. With some creativity, that means they can do a lot, like pour mana into the seismic dagger so that once it's driven into the ground, it sends out waves filled with his own mana, letting him sense anything moving across the Arlen, even if he can't see it. That's exactly what he did earlier, so now his confident smile makes a lot more sense. It basically works like a locator, making enemies easy to find. After a while, we return to the main force where Ragnar announces that time is up and it's time to count how many orcs each team killed. First up are some poor fools who couldn't find a single enemy, so he calls them pathetic. He keeps going like that through the smaller kingdoms. Honestly, shocked that they failed to kill even one. Statistically, he says it should be impossible to be that useless. But things shift a little when Bruce and Jonathan step up and hand over a bag with 6 ears. That's the best result so far. And Jonathan explains they got lucky and ran into a whole scouting unit. Ragnar answers that luck is also a skill because in battle some people die just from bad luck. Then he takes a bag from a last-minute Imperial unit he sent out himself so they wouldn't be left out of the contest. They managed to kill 12 orcs, which is pretty solid considering they started an hour later than the other teams. Naturally, that annoys Sylvia, who says it feels like he's mocking them. But Ragnar, already acting like the winner, insists that what really matters is the results they get in battle. Still, his smile vanishes when his subordinate tells him there's one more bag left to count. Briel's. He sets a sack on the table that clearly looks like it holds around 40 ears, then asks Yuri what his secret is. MC simply says nothing. That night, Herod is handling camp duties when a guy brushes past him, slamming into his shoulder and giving him a nasty look. At first, Hard tries not to think much of it, but after a while he finally brings the gossip to Yuri, saying knights from other nations have been provoking their men lately. He expected that, so he calms him down and says it's just jealousy. It shouldn't turn into anything bigger. Besides, what matters now is dealing with the orcs they captured, including a shaman Corey has been trying to question all night without much luck. Then, out of nowhere, the shaman starts screaming like crazy, repeating Black Dog again and again. Corey explains that a rumor has been spreading among the orcs about a knight who can track them like a dog. They're obviously talking about Yuri, and while Harry can't help laughing, Corey says he shouldn't take it as a compliment, because it also means the orcs now see him as a real threat. That boosts the protagonist's ego a bit, but the wording also means he's the Empire's dog. His mood flips right away and he orders them to cut the bastards' heads off. Luckily, Corey calms him down, reminding him that these are the most talkative orcs they've caught so far. In fact, the prisoners keep talking, revealing that Corey, one of Oka's direct subordinates and one of the deadliest warriors of the Central Tribes, is already prepared to face the Allied forces. Corey warns that Corey plans to wipe them out before they tie me, even get a chance to reach Oka. Yuri thanks him for the work and tells Herod that now they can kill the prisoners while he reports everything to Ragnar. What MC doesn't expect is that the moment he steps into Ragnar's tent, the blonde asks if he has a girlfriend. Then he casually says he has a very cute niece and can introduce her after the war, a deal most people would treat like winning the lottery. But not Yuri, who walks out of there like he's having war flashbacks, telling himself again and again that he has to avoid that menace until he runs into Sylvia. She kindly tries to calm him down, and it works because Yuri suddenly realizes that if he wants Ragnar off his back and never trying to pair him with Trina again, the best move is to pretend he's dating someone who doesn't actually love him, but owes him too much to say no. And of course, that person is Sylvia. He grabs her by the shoulders, and after not so subtly reminding her that he saved her life before, says he'll need her help soon with something and it has to stay secret. But he gives no details and just leaves, making her totally confused. Then Valet suddenly appears behind her, saying the two of them look great together and that he supports her if she wants to go after the Prince of Briel. In response, Sylvia gives him a look that reminds us how perfect Yuri's plan really is. The next day, all the Allied troops get moving again when Herod walks up and says he already heard the rumors. Apparently, the reason Ragnar is so obsessed with Yuri and keeps calling him to the tent every night is that they're discussing the details of a possible marriage with the famous Trina. He tries to deny it, but when he looks around at the others, he realizes they all know the gossip. So, the only thing left to do is ignore it. But then he notices they're being surrounded by an unusual number of crows, which means something is wrong. So, he moves ahead to find out what the hell is going on. Sadly, it's even worse than anyone expected because they reach a narrow path filled with mangled corpses. They reach a narrow path filled with torn-apart civilians, and Ragnar knows this is the enemy's welcome. Yuri realizes it is not just a warning. This is one of the creature's sick habits. They use human bodies as decorations, both for fun and to show what they think human lives are worth. Since the rest of the army has not seen it yet, the protagonist says they should clear the bodies before morale drops. Renji agrees, so the soldiers from Briel burn every trace of the slaughter. All the while, Yuri keeps reminding them not to let it shake them. Then he notices two of his men have gone too deep into the canyon. He orders them back, but they brush it off and keep checking the area until one spots something odd. Some arrowheads are pointed at the ground. That is the opposite of how the orcs pinned up the bodies, which means the shots came from above. This was not just a road, it was a trap, and they realize too late when dozens of orcs start appearing in the distance. Without warning, they fire, dropping one soldier in seconds. The other quickly yells that they are under attack, but when he sees more arrows rushing straight at him, he knows he cannot run in time. Luckily, Yuri steps in, arriving at the last second and throwing himself in front of him. He unleashes a burst of energy strong enough to stop the arrows, and seeing the wounded man is still alive, he tells them to run back to the Holy Kingdom troops who will help them. Still, it is obvious they walked into the most basic trap imaginable. Then the orcs calmly pull back, as if that warning was all they needed, as if they know they can wipe them out any time. Being treated like a fool makes Yuri's blood boil, but he knows they are not ready to attack yet. So he returns and reports everything. The problem is the roads here leave them no way around, so Ragnar says they will have to attack. Yuri says he already expected that he has a plan. He just needs an archery unit to keep the bastards pinned down while he and his men take the top of the ravine. Next, the same orcs are watching from above when one of them notices movement. A wave of arrows flying fast right at him. Luckily for that bastard, they hit the edge of the cliff. But it is not a miss. It is the first warning from Ragnar's archers, who are ordered to keep them boxed in as long as possible. Mainly because while the arrows distract them, Yuri starts climbing the steep wall at an incredible speed with the rest of the Baal's soldiers following behind. They are slower, but they know this is the best way to catch the enemy off guard. The problem is the orcs expected this kind of move and answer by dropping a huge rock on Yuri's head, forcing him to get bolder. In an instant he releases all his magic daggers, guiding them with mana to clear the smaller rocks, while also making a kind of stairway that frees his hands long enough to split the biggest rock in two. The problem is that as impressive as that was, he cannot do it often, so he has to use his sword to keep from falling. The good thing is that attack tells him he needs to hurry, so he throws all his strength into reaching the top where the orcs are waiting to welcome him. They instantly start shouting, and Yuri recognizes the words from before, Black Dog. So he lets them know it is him and charges with everything he has, cutting through chests, arms, heads, anything in his path. Then he comes face to face with the strongest one there. Even with one arm, the brute hits hard enough that Yuri can barely block, and he knows it would be far worse if the orc had both arms. So MC taunts him and tries to stay calm, even though more orcs keep gathering around him, leaving him even more surrounded than before. At one point, one of the bastards almost drives a giant spear into his back, and even though he blocks it, that is his cue to yell for Jared and the others to hurry. He cannot keep this up much longer. Luckily, Jared shouts back that they are almost at the top, and seconds later, he and Lauren finally arrive, pausing just a moment to catch their breath before joining the fight. That changes the pace of the battle fast, but Yuri still does not let up. He keeps yelling for the rest to move because there is no time to rest. Little by little, it stops being 20 against 3 and becomes his whole unit against the orcs, who start dropping one after another under Ragnar's confident gaze and proud laugh. Meanwhile, the main alliance force crosses the canyon without losing a single soldier, and at last they can rest in camp where Yuri and Jared meet to talk about how they will face Karuna, whose stronghold is getting closer. Then the blonde man mentions that Sylvia sent word, even if she is not happy, that he keeps getting all the credit. She is willing to send a couple of priests if he needs them. Always ready for gossip. Herod asks if something is going on between them, and Yuri immediately says no, then sends him back to his tent, staying alone with the map, and Asana, who has been standing behind him for hours without him noticing. She finally says she found the man they were looking for, explaining that he is inside orc territory, not working with them or fighting them, but held as a prisoner of war. The problem is even she could not get close enough to free him. So she warns Yuri to be very careful from now on. She knows the protagonist cares about the man, but she has only heard bad things about him, and she has a feeling that if he and the allied forces cross paths, they might even turn against each other. To be clear, she always called him the foreigner, so that is what we will call him. Asana asks if she should keep digging, but Yuri calms her down, saying he will talk to the man himself when they meet. MC is sure the foreigner wants Okua's head more than anything, and if they share that goal, he could become an ally. For now, he only wants Asana to watch him until he arrives, and she agrees, though she still seems unsure. She adds that if Yuri plans to meet the foreigner in person, she wants to go too in case protection is needed. It is kind, and maybe even necessary, but the protagonist stands and reminds her he did not hire her to be his bodyguard or risk her life for him, so he will protect himself. The problem is, her face makes it clear she did not take that well, and despite his attempt to smooth it over, Asana simply disappears, focused on finishing her mission. Later, Yuri sits with some soldiers by the fire while Jared tells the story of when they met the Death Knight, adding fake details so he sounds like the seasoned hero in front of the rookies. Even though MC knows it was nowhere near that epic. When the others ask if Jared is telling the truth, he plays along and says Jared did the best he could, letting him enjoy the glory a little longer. Soon, Jared shifts from bragging to giving them a full life lesson with endless wise remarks. But everything changes when Yuri notices a figure behind them in rags. He jumps to his feet because it is too big to be human, and right away he realizes it is an orc, ordering everyone to get ready. But when Jared and the others turn to face it, the enemy is gone. That is why Jared asks if Yuri saw wrong and tells him to get some sleep, but he insists the orc is still there. He is just apparently the only one who can see it. Then the figure fades like a shadow, and Yuri knows it is too real to be just a trick. So he starts chasing it through the forest, figuring it must be some kind of scout with invisibility or something close. In the end, he has no choice but to strike with a blow strong enough to kill a man. But the shadow simply breaks apart and drops onto him, stretching over his body in a deeply creepy way. By instinct, he uses his mana method to tear it off, but he can still feel traces of that dark aura on him. So he goes to Hernando and asks what the hell it was. Hernando is in the middle of a good poker game, so he first tries to send Yuri away, then gives an answer. Maybe it used sorcery to stay hidden, and the protagonist could see it because his instincts are so sharp. The problem is, if orcs can turn invisible, that adds another danger for the next battle, and Yuri needs some kind of counter. Hernando tells him magic has limits in battle, especially because those bastards use a dangerous branch of dark magic. Because of that, the best move is not to answer with more magic, but to cancel and break the enemy shaman's tricks, and that is exactly what he will Kenshinti do. MC thanks him, then warns that next time he holds a card night without inviting him to gamble, they are going to have a serious problem. After that, he leaves them to enjoy the game. The scene shifts to what looks like Karui's hideout, where he's met by the very sorcerer who had been watching Yuri. He reports everything he saw, and most importantly, he casts a new spell that boosts his whole army. Or at least that's how it seems. The next day, Ragna orders a full assault on Karich's camp, so all the troops gather outside waiting for the right moment to strike. That includes Bulda's forces, who once again take the lead. They rush straight at the fortress walls, but the enemy archers answer almost at once. A storm of arrows fills the sky far more than Yuri expected. And even though he orders a retreat, many of his men are still hit, some dying on the spot. With every death, he feels responsible, but he forces himself to keep going. The truth is, they were never just the vanguard. They were bait meant to draw the orcs in while Ragna launched the real attack. At that moment, the blonde commander moves and orders them to open the gate already. So, they bring up a huge battering ram and smash through in one blow, making the perfect opening for the Imperial army to charge in and catch the orcs off guard. Meanwhile, Yuri tells his men to stop because he can see in the distance that Ragna has broken through the main gate. Their job as bait is over, so now they need to join the others. But then Jonas, who's been following nearby, cuts in and says, Ragna's force is already at the front gate, so they should use the distraction to hit from the rear and bring the camp down faster. Yuri agrees, but says they don't have a battering ram, and the back will be built purely for defense, making it hard to break through without losing the element of surprise. Join reminds him they don't always need siege weapons and draws his sword, making it clear he can handle it himself. So the next thing we get is a knight standing before a wall at least 3 times his height. Instead of hesitating, he attacks with total confidence, unleashing a wave of mana that tears the wall apart in one strike and opens a path the orcs clearly never thought anyone could use. Without wasting a second, Yuri praises him and charges in, cutting down orcs as he moves, while telling his men it's time to show why they came here. They're not just fighting for the allied forces, they're fighting for Briel and for the strength of their kingdom. Right away, a group of orcs lowers their spears to stop them, but Herod shatters their weapons with a move that even surprises Yuri, who notices he looks more fired up than usual. Hearing that, Lauren decides it's his turn to stand out and impress the protagonist, so he jumps into the fight too, taking heads as he leaps over the orcs, all in the name of Briel's prince. That energy spreads to Bruce and soldiers too. They refuse to let Bowl take all the glory and use the momentum to wipe out the units in the area. From a distance, Yuri can tell the orcs' defense is finally weakening, but it feels strange not to see any sign of the main force, which should already be spread through the camp. Worse, that small advantage disappears when a full unit of orc vows appears and starts crushing soldiers like flies. One of them is even about to kill Herod when Yuri steps in just in time to pull him clear. Without missing a beat, he tells him he's not allowed to die after telling those epic stories only once, then orders him to stay sharp, because they still have a lot left to do. Keeping calm, Yuri faces the orc vow and tears off one of its arms. But even as the red banner that marks them falls to the ground, he can't shake the feeling that something worse is coming. That feeling grows stronger. And in the distance, at the center of the camp, Karui finally appears. He's still a bit away from Yuri, so they keep fighting the orc vows until the sense of danger becomes too strong to ignore. Hard feels it too, and MC tells him to come along and face whatever is inside that tent, hoping they can still make it in time to help whoever is stuck fighting that thing. Then a soldier suddenly comes flying out of the tent like he was nothing but a rag doll. And even though Karui finally steps outside, he vanishes as fast as he appeared, lunging at the soldiers with speed and agility no orc his size should have. And if that wasn't enough, once he lands in the middle of a crowd of soldiers, he starts spinning his axe and cleaving them in half, leaving behind a thick mist of blood that spreads across the battlefield and turns the whole scene into something horrifying. The slaughter is so brutal that Yuri starts shaking and orders all his men to fall back because from here on they won't be able to stop him. His soldiers clear the area at once and he walks toward Curry, ignoring Jared's warning when he tries to go with him. But Jonas says it's pointless. Yuri probably can't even hear him now. This enemy needs all of his focus, and if anyone jumps in, they'll only get in the way. Even so, Jonas knows the protagonist can't handle everything alone, so he'll stay and deal with the prince while the others handle the rest. With that settled, we move to the fight between MC and Curry, who blocks his attacks with worrying ease and smiles like he's already read every move he can make. Just like before, Yuri realizes that if even one of Kerr's hits lands, he'll go down instantly. So he needs a plan. Then, to his surprise, Jonas steps between them and says the protagonist could use a hand that they can cover each other. What he doesn't say is that this isn't just strategy. He saw something in Yuri, the same look Ari had, like a mother pushed to the edge, someone carrying too many people on her back. What stands out when Jonas fights is that the fear is gone. All that's left is the will to protect his men like someone who truly knows what it means to lose people in war. Then Curry motions for them to come closer, and neither of them hesitates to answer as they rush in at their own pace. The problem is the same strike that was enough to destroy a wall before means nothing to this orc who blocks it with ease, making even Jonas admit he's a monster. Then it's Yuri's turn. He attacks again, but his blow not only lacks the power to matter. Curry grabs him by the shoulder and tosses him aside like a rock in the road. What the orc didn't expect is that the rock can fight back. Yuri still manages to slice his palm, determined to do any damage he can. Even though he's weaker, MC mocks him, saying his men will wipe out those proud orcs while Curry can do nothing to stop it. He even dares him to kill them all if he wants to go help his own side, and keeps pressing the attack. Now the two fight together, and that teamwork starts to shift the battle. Curry begins to feel pressure for the first time, so much that he starts shouting, not in pain, but like he's calling for something. Then the clouds blot out the last light in the sky, and the battlefield darkens as it fills with a deeply sinister energy. That power flows straight into Kuru, making him stronger to the point that he slams Jonas in the chest before he can defend himself. Luckily, the knight doesn't fall. Even wounded, he charges the giant and tells him he'll need far more power if he wants to win. Of course, Yuri covers him, and both of them reach the same conclusion. Ever since that black smoke appeared, the bastard's strength has shot up. It feels exactly like what Yuri sensed the night before when he saw that ghost-like sorcerer. So he can only hope Hernando can break the magic in time. The real problem starts when the dark energy spreads beyond Curry's body, soaking into every enemy on the battlefield and making them at least 10 times stronger than before. In that moment, the balance of the fight breaks again, and the bastards even start healing as part of the spell that lets even weaker orcs gain the upper hand over the soldiers. And Yuri has no choice but to jump in so they aren't wiped out. But it becomes painfully obvious that they've grown absurdly strong. And the most shocking part comes when he splits one of them open through the chest in two, and it still doesn't die. Instead, it regenerates on the spot, while at the same time a sorcerer comes out of its chest and using the short distance wraps Yuri inside that black mist. Inside his mind, an unknown voice starts repeating again and again that he shouldn't resist. And as if that weren't enough, a giant eye watches him up close, asking why he's the only one still alive. Then, out of nowhere, images of his brothers being slaughtered crash into his mind. His mind fills with the people he loves, dead all around him, blaming him for leaving them behind and surviving after the kingdom fell. Then he looks at himself and sees not who he is now, but the older version from that other timeline. The one who ran, gave up, and threw away his duty as a Briel. At the same time, the voice keeps telling him changing anything is pointless, that this is his fate. It almost works, but Yuri just answers, yeah, right, and releases his mana technique, breaking free from the darkness at once. Even thanks the thing for taking him seriously enough to try lecturing him, because to Yuri all that talk about fate is just nonsense. After wiping out the last of the darkness around him, he comes face to face with the sorcerer who desperately tries to bind him again. But, compared to Yuri's past enemies, this guy is nothing. He rushes him and kills him in one strike. The moment he falls, the darkness covering the sky vanishes and the orcs lose their boost. With the sorcerer dead, Yuri knows this is his chance, so he shouts that the magic is broken. That instantly lifts his soldiers' spirits, and they push the battle back in their favor. As for Jonas, it's amazing how long he's held on, even while badly hurt. But unlike the others, time is against him, and Karui proves it with a punch straight to his stomach, making him cough up blood before crashing to the ground, unable to move. Karui is so savage that even with Johnny's already down, he jumps in to finish him. Yuri races over to stop it, but Johnny's yells for him to stay back. He doubts either of them could survive that hit. Still, one choice the protagonist made when he accepted this new life was to never give up. He'll fight to the end. Then something no one expected happens. Karui's arm goes flying, and it wasn't Yuri or Junis who did it, but the foreigner, who finally steps onto the battlefield and tells MC he's done well so far. The whole time the man looks completely calm, like none of this matters to him. When Curry tries to strike back, the foreigner grabs one of the horns on his helmet and tells him to shut up, calling him a plague on this world and complaining that they did not even feed him properly while he was locked up. From his accent build in the strange way he uses a sword. Yuri realizes this is the man he's been looking for. What's even crazier is that he barely has time to process it before. With one swift, clean move, the foreigner cuts off the orc's head and ends the battle for good. Now, face to face, the foreigner says he only stepped in because of the interesting things they showed during the fight, though it ruined the plans he had. Yuri cuts him off, thanks him, and throws in a few compliments too. He says this must be the man who, despite being an outsider, became one of the strongest fighters on the continent. In other words, he makes it clear he knows exactly who he is, then asks if he let himself get captured to reach Okua, and if so, Yuri can help. They can work together, and that completely changes the foreigner's challenging look. They spend the rest of the afternoon killing the remaining orcs in the camp, and Ragna even sticks Kurui's head on a spear to the protagonist. That's clear proof things are changing. In his past life, the Allied forces never won this hard, so history is shifting. Once things settle down, Herod reports that their losses were not as bad as expected. The worst damage was mental. After seeing the horror inside Kurui's quarters, bodies everywhere, and abused women forced to give birth to half-orcs, Yuri orders that every survivor be treated right away, and that they keep following the foreigner's requests. Exactly. Herod says they already are, but the jerk is a total pain and complains about every meal even though the food is perfectly fine. Feeling a little sorry for them, Yuri decides it's time to talk to the man himself. He finds him eating by the campfire, and once he's done, MC plans to start asking questions, but the foreigner beats him to it. He first wants to know how he canceled that sorcerer's dirty trick. That was clearly the most impressive part, and the reason he chose to step in. So Yuri needs to be completely honest. Depending on the answer, he'll decide whether the protagonist lives or dies. From his tone, MC can tell he means it, so lying would be pointless. He admits he is not fully sure how he did it. His mana method just reacted and cut through it. To show him, Yuri activates the technique right there, the creed passed down from his ancestor. What's surprising is that the foreigner says maybe they were meant to meet because he knows that method well. The sect that raised him and taught him everything has ties to Hendrik Bool. Apparently Hendrik was a great supporter of his ancestors, so much that there he is, known as the Sky-Destroying Swordsman. Back then, he was the sect leader's best friend, and helped greatly in wiping out the demonic sect that made him an important figure in the history of the lands across the sea. He also explains that his sect still keeps the traditions left from that time, which is why his technique is similar to Yuri's. As for why he's here now, it's to destroy everyone tied to the demonic side to cleanse evil from the world. That explains why he's so obsessed with killing orcs, especially in Okua, and he has no plan to waste that chance. He offers the man his help and the support of all his troops to reach that goal. He'll get food, hot water, the title of honorary knight, and after the war, a huge reward and money. All he has to do is join their side. With all that on the table, the foreigner agrees right away with only one condition. Yuri has to call him master. He says he sees potential in the protagonist and is willing to take him as a disciple. Unofficially, of course, because joining the sect for real is a massive hassle and costs a lot of money. Still, he is willing to overlook all that because of MC's talent. The problem is MC already has a master, the famous sword demon. That deeply offends the man who insists he can have two masters just fine. For now, what matters is meeting with the allied commander because if they're going to help, there's something he needs to tell them about the orcs. So they gather inside Ragna's tent where the foreigner bluntly reveals that Okua is carrying out human sacrifices not mainly to eat or torture people, but to fuel black magic. That proves the whole army is already corrupted using dark techniques like the ones from the last battle to greatly raise their combat power. Of course, there is no guarantee that is their final trick, so they need a countermeasure. The foreigner then explains why he let himself be captured. He wanted to reach Okura as a sacrifice. That plan is ruined now, so he has no choice but to work with them. Ragna agrees, puts Yuri in charge of the foreigner, and says he'll have his men investigate ways to stop that black magic. Then he asks the protagonist if it's true that one of his subordinates is a half-orc, and when MC says yes, Ragna asks him to decide what should be done with the half-orcs they rescued from Kerr's camp. Yuri agrees, though he knows the job was handed to him because nobody else wants to deal with it. Things get tense when he arrives where they're being held, and hears an Imperial soldier arguing with Graham. The soldier thinks they should add the half-orcs to their army as obedient fighters and use them to match Briel in that area. Graham argues they also need to think about the women who will never get over that awful trauma. That's when Yuri finally steps in and asks the soldier if he's really sure they would help in battle. The man immediately says, yes, they're very docile and would follow orders if they used a little force. Yuri admits that may be true, but reminds him that prisoners of war can never be comrades trusted with their lives, no matter how you look at it. This is a hard choice. So he asks one of the women to tell them what happened there. How not just orcs, but half-orcs too, turned their lives into hell. With a shaking voice, the woman says her younger sister was hurt. And because she couldn't move, those monsters tore her apart, ripping off her limbs like she was nothing, just for fun. Yuri asks her name, and she introduces herself as he of Sodor. When she recognizes him as the Prince of Briel, she says she has only one request, that he avenge them. He agrees, then turns to Graham and makes one thing clear. What happens next will be done as he Briel the warrior, not as one of the allied commanders. Even if the half-orcs were also victims of Karui, they became accomplices when they killed innocent people and left scars that will never fade. He understands why some want to use them, but giving value to those who trampled human lives is not an option, so they decide to wipe out every last one of them. Graham agrees to handle the execution. It goes on like that through the whole night, and the next morning something nobody expected happens. A group of orcs arrives at the camp, not to fight, but supposedly to negotiate. They claim they have something to offer. So, even though no one is foolish enough to trust those bastards, they still have no choice but to open the gates and see what the hell they are planning. Next, the orcs are shown talking among themselves, completely relaxed, while Ragnar reads the document they brought, wearing such a hard-to-read look that Yuri finally asks what this is all about. The blonde man answers by asking why the protagonist thinks he became commander of the Allied forces. MC guesses it is because he is skilled at choosing the best battle plan, but Ragnar tells him to think a little more about the political reasons he was picked for the job. Then he explains that the truth is that he does not get along well with the Emperor, and logically he should have been sent anyway. But the Empire rarely runs on logic. If he wins, he will be praised as a hero, and his political power will rise, which is not as good for the sent Emperor as it may seem. Even without saying it out loud, Yuri understands what he means. This is a war the Emperor expects them to lose, so he can make Ragnar look incompetent, and boost his own standing among the Empire's elites. In his past life, the Allied forces' defeat was exactly the push the Emperor needed to take full control of the Empire. And now it seems likely he already made a deal with the orcs to make that happen. Yuri asks if he is saying this is all a trap. Ragnar, surprisingly honest, says yes and hands him the orc's message. It clearly says the Emperor made a secret pact with Okua, and if Ra does not want to throw his life away, he should play the role of a useless commander and stop fighting. The only catch is that the orcs who delivered it insist they belong to some anonymous group opposed to Okua. Rana is not sure what to make of that, so he asks the protagonist what they should do. The protagonist just throws the letter to the ground and stomps on it in disgust. True or not, the best move is still the same. Win and go home. Ragnar agrees with him. None of them have any future if they lose, or worse, give up. So he decides to keep fighting with everything they have, and tells Yuri to deal with their guests. With that, MC heads out to where they were still chatting away, and kills all three in a single strike, leaving the knight stunned. They already knew he was strong, but it still feels a little reckless since they were only messengers. Ragnar calms them down, saying killing them was the best choice. After all, Yuri still has a promise to keep getting revenge on those damned monsters. Later, Ragnar summons a man called Iceman, one of the best mages in the Imperial Court, and asks everything he knows about dark magic. At first, the mage brushes it off, saying it is an outdated secret that any dispeller can block. Old stories mention a kind of dark magic that could revive and control the dead, but he calls that nothing more than superstition. Then Ragnar reveals there are strong rumors that Kua is sacrificing humans to unleash spells no one has ever seen, and says they may have found an ancient form of dark magic from the old nation of Adalin, which ruled those lands long ago. People say they were highly skilled in magic, and legend calls it the home of one of the 10 strongest beings still wandering that region even now. Hearth the Death Knight. As for sacrifices, they usually are not used to boost power but to summon things, so Okua may just be buying time. If he had to guess, he would say they found a dungeon inside the ruins of Adelvine, one with something very important inside that they want to reach no matter what. After that, the Allied forces keep moving forward. One of Yuri's men reports that support from the Ball Sash supply unit has been cut off, most likely because of the repeated camp attacks. That means they now need to secure whatever supplies they can, which will not be easy since they are closer to Aqua than ever. In fact, it would not be strange if the enemy sent as many orcs as possible to hit them, though that may not be so bad since the supply shortage means they cannot afford a drawn-out war anymore. Yuri's thoughts are cut off when his horse suddenly starts neighing, and he orders everyone to get off their mounts. At first it feels like an earthquake, but using his mana method, Yuri can sense that it is something very different. Then, out of nowhere, a tower rises from the ground right in front of them, and Radna immediately orders his mages to inspect it for any sign that it is connected to the orcs. The strange part is that it seems sealed somehow. They cannot see past the outer layer. That is why Yuri suggests they go inside and find out for themselves. Unlike him, Ragnar loves a good mystery and insists there is probably something important in there they need to confirm in person. The problem is that he planned to take his own men and keep anyone else they met at a distance, but the blonde commander orders a few Imperial knights to go with them. A small team of 3 led by a man named Raydane. Of course, Herod is not thrilled about dealing with those men either, but they have no choice except hope those knights are not hiding anything. After that, Yuri stops in front of what looks like the entrance, a completely sealed door. He starts checking the area for some kind of mechanism, but then almost on instinct, Yuri places his hand on the door and uses his mana method, as if that triggers something inside the tower. The door opens on its own, welcoming them far too easily. To Yuri, it feels like the tower had been waiting for someone. So, they step into the tower's darkness, and only then realize none of them brought torches. That should mean turning back to get some, but the protagonist tries something else instead. He grabs one of the wall torches and runs his mana method through it to see if it reacts like the door did. Not only does that light the torch in his hand, it lights every torch along the hall. That gets Hart excited, and he asks if Yuri has been here before. MC says no, but that is not enough to convince Rodane, who keeps watching him suspiciously. Eventually, they reach a dead end filled with orc bones. The only way forward is a huge door beside a corpse that stands out because it is not an orc, but a human. Little by little, the scene starts to make sense. Yuri realizes that person died protecting the door from the orcs. But unlike the rest of the tower, it does not react when he feeds it mana. So, he suggests they go back and look again for something they missed. The problem is that while they talk, they do not notice the human skeleton has started moving until it grabs Yuri's arm and releases a blinding wave of energy while telling them to remember, because this is their salvation. But the strangest part comes when Yuri opens his eyes again. He has been transported to what looks like the outside of the tower, though not in his real body, more like a vision. Then a boy runs past him, excitedly calling for his master, and he realizes this is not the present, but a memory. From the master's clothes, he understands these memories belong to that man from before he died and was left forgotten beside that door. What is even more shocking is that leaving a memory behind after death takes an absurd amount of magic, so the message must be important. Then the man asks the boy if he finished preparing for that day's selection, but the kid refuses and says he is tired of only reading books and wants to finally use what he has learned. In response, the man shows him a large red crystal and explains it is the mark of an orc hunter. Until he earns it, he cannot be called a real hunter or go hunting. Yuri finally understands why this place works so well in battle. Then comes the bigger surprise. The boy says he does not even understand why they need to kill orcs at all, and thinks things might improve if they talk and try to reach an agreement. The man stays silent at first, but decides it is time to tell the truth. Orcs are not a separate race at all. They are humans corrupted by dark magic. Even Yuri is stunned and freezes in place as the man explains that long ago there was a noble obsessed with killing. He murdered his own people for the most ridiculous reasons. So, the king made a law to stop those atrocities. Little by little, that noble lost his mind, driven crazy by his need to kill until a sorcerer approached and offered a solution. The king had forbidden killing humans, but nothing said they could not turn humans into something else, something they could slaughter without guilt or punishment. And under that advice, following the sorcerer's advice, the noble pushed his own people into dark magic that twisted them into grotesque monsters filled with hatred for humans. And that gave him the perfect excuse to wipe them out whenever he wanted. So every orc Yuri has killed until now was once human. The boy then asks if that sorcerer was ever punished. The man says he ran away as soon as his crimes were exposed. Sadly, no one ever found a way to turn them back. The orcs were exiled and the hunters came to see killing them as saving them from that awful fate. That also explains the foreigner's goal of wiping evil from the world. Since the orc's power comes from dark magic, but just when it seems more answers are coming, the memory fades. It skips forward several years. Now the memory is inside the ruins. The man insists they keep moving, but the boy says they should wait for reinforcements. The problem is the man refuses to stop, saying no one is coming. But Delwana has already fallen. The orcs finally reach this place. Even if he dies, he says the fight still matters. The boy will survive and pass his teachings on to the next generation. That's the cycle of life. But the boy says that even if he runs, he will not get far. So he would rather stay and fight and leave their memories in these ruins. Maybe someday someone will find them. That means these are not only the man's memories. They belong to the boy, too. With their last strength, both of them protected the truth about the orcs' real origin and their own. They were hunters, once known as the strongest in Adelvoin. So, while the man fought, the boy poured everything he knew into those memories. He gathered all he had learned, hoping someone in the future could finish what they could not. Then comes the shocking part. His eyes meet the protagonist's, as if he knows the protagonist is there. He warns him to be very careful with the devil's tome. After that, the boy dies. The memories come to an end, and Yuri returns to the present. It feels like he did not just witness someone else's past. He relived memories buried deep inside himself. Worried, Herod asks if he saw anything else. MC says he needs time to process it. But then the tower starts shaking. At first he thinks it is another quake, but it is something worse. The orcs are attacking. Everyone is stunned. Either the orcs somehow sensed them there, or this was a trap meant to lure them in. Yuri tells them to stop panicking. He explains this place used to be an orc hunter's base, so it makes sense the orcs would come destroy it after seeing it rise in the plains. Then he uses his perception skill to count the enemy. There are only 10 orcs. That means they can handle this. And while the safer choice would be rejoining the main force, Yuri gives a very different order. They will stay and fight. The Empire soldiers are stunned and ask if they should not pull back, but he simply takes the old hunter's sword. He makes a dagger. One thing clear. He already knows the best way to fight these monsters, and the sword is not the only thing they borrow from the tower. Later, when the orcs try to break in, they suddenly find themselves surrounded by hunter gems. Yuri placed them there in key spots to throw the orcs off balance. The moment he gives the signal, the others burst out from hiding and strike right when the orcs are most distracted. Unlike their last battles, this is not knights fighting fair against equals. They move through the battlefield like hunters, aiming for heads and necks so well it feels like the orcs walk straight into a trap. These tactics go against everything taught in Briel, but they work and they rise in Yuri's mind like he has done this before, as if he himself were an orc hunter carrying the knowledge his ancestors sharpened for decades. And when he ends up face to face with an enemy, he realizes he can now naturally tell which part of an orc's body is best to strike. In one move, he pierces its arm and takes it out of the fight. He no longer needs to battle them with everything he has, or use soul separation. It is not needed anymore. Now he can cut off their heads like rats that picked the wrong predator, and Yuri knows that is all. Thanks to the hunters, so he says it out loud. He will make good use of their legacy, and the hunters of Adelvine will never be forgotten. That night, the protagonist meets with Ragna. Ragna thanks him because thanks to their help, they secured the area around the ruins. Without sharing the whole truth, Yuri explains that the place was the hunter's base, and asks if Ragna knows anything at all about the Devil's Tome. Sadly, Ragna says he has never heard of it. MC tells him it is tied to black magic, and Ragna promises to look into it. When he leaves the tent, Rodin is waiting for him. He says he was seriously impressed by the protagonist in the last battle, and the protagonist is shocked to see he can actually be nice. Before this, the guy had been a real pain. But now he explains it is because the Empire's rules about how they should act are very strict. To be honest, they had serious doubts about what MC would be like on the battlefield. But he proved his age means nothing because he fights like a seasoned veteran, which is funny since Yuri is really around 40. Their talk gets so friendly that Rodin asks if he left a girlfriend back in Yamrio. He immediately asks if Ragna told him to find that out, and Riadane plays dumb. So, the protagonist uses the chance to make one thing very clear. He would never get involved with the Imperial Princess. That shocks Rodin because everyone in the Empire adores her. She is beautiful and kind, and just thinking about her makes the poor guy blush. That reminds Yuri this is part of her trick. She treats everyone in a way that makes them feel special. So he starts his own plan and says there is already a woman interested in him. In fact, she is his girlfriend. In his head, he apologizes to Sylvia for dragging her into this. Even surprised, Rodin congratulates him and admits he also has a girlfriend and plans to propose when he returns from the war. Yuri warns him not to say things like that because there is a superstition that if someone says stuff like that, something bad will happen, and right then something explodes behind them. MC gives him a look that says, "Told you so." They are under enemy attack. In seconds, the camp turns into hell. Fire, smoke, and panic because now more than ever they have to protect the few supplies they have left. Worst of all, for the first time Hernando is caught off guard. He cannot understand how hundreds of orcs got this close without being detected. And for some reason his dispelling magic is not just failing. The bastards are canceling it out. Yuri instantly realizes how bad this is and rushes over asking him for a report. Hernando says it is like the orcs set up a trap ahead of time, so he tells him he will deal with the sorcerers behind it. But he needs Hernando to use his magic the second he gets the chance. After that, he just says, "I am counting on you," and sprints off while studying the orcs for any clue that will reveal which one is the sorcerer. He remembers the old hunter's lesson. Orc sorcerers lose their sight because of dark magic. So, the way to spot one is to find the orc moving strangely or unsteadily, and that lets Yuri identify the culprit in seconds. He drives his sword through its neck like a spear, stopping it long enough for him to get close and brutally cut off its head. The only problem now is that he is surrounded by a ridiculous number of enemies. They stare at him like hunters eyeing prey. But what they do not realize is that Yuri is no longer alone. Right then, Fernando gets his magic back and attacks with a blast of fire so huge it looks like the protagonist will burn with the orcs. That makes them hesitate, calling it a dirty trick. But just like before, Yuri disperses the attack and sends the flames at them instead of himself. Then he asks if they still think they have the upper hand. But another huge explosion goes off behind him, and he curses himself for celebrating too soon. More enemies start crawling out of the ground, so he knows he has to get more extreme. He asks Hernando for another fireball, even stronger than the last one, but Hernando looks like he cannot do it, even if he wants to. He is exhausted, which means Yuri has to fight, alone now. At this point, MC admits charging into the enemy just to kill the sorcerer was not exactly his smartest move. He got carried away by the last win. Even so, with death closer than ever, he is not afraid. What those monsters do not know is that he has already faced this once before. He died crawling away like a coward, so this time he will not run. With total confidence, he tells them to come at him already. But then the foreigner steps in saying he likes Yuri's spirit. But this is no time for dying speeches, and that his master taught him a man is truly alive when he is ready to die. Truly, he's glad he learned that, because now he can call him a real student. Then he tells him to get ready. This is his first lesson. Today he'll show him the Chongsung sword style. He takes a deep breath and sets his stance. Then he swings, releasing a fiery wave of energy. It comes from nothing but raw speed and power. That single strike tears through dozens of orcs in seconds. Yuri freezes on the spot. For the first time, he's seeing the strength of one of the 10 mightiest people on the continent. But the foreigner says, the lesson isn't over. He'll only clear half of them. So the protagonist jumps back in, trying to copy what he just saw. Watching from afar, the foreigner thinks Yuri is a strange kid. His moves are rough and messy, yet they're battle-tested and useful. That kind of talent naturally draws people in. And in the middle of the chaos, he sees MC like a dim but steady star. It's exactly the sign he needed to know he chose the right path. Now he wonders whether that star will be swallowed by the darkness threatening the world or keep growing until it becomes a new guiding star. Either way, he knows there's only one way to find out. Stay and watch him closely. At the same time, the fight keeps raging as more and more blasts rip across the battlefield, and every new explosion means more orcs, pushing things into a crisis. Yuri orders Jared and Lauren to move fast and cut them down. The moment they come out of the ground, the two rush over to the new breach points and start taking heads as best they can. The problem is there are too many tunnels, and those bastards are faster than they look, so this can't last long. On top of that, Yuri has a terrible feeling about all this. A force this big wouldn't move without reason. That means there's something else down there besides the orc mage. So he puts a hand on the ground and focuses all his senses until he can clearly track the enemies moving underground, and most importantly, a giant worm they're using to dig the tunnels. The second he locks onto it, he takes off, running straight toward the creature. Jared and Lauren have no idea what's going on, but the blonde follows without hesitation in his eyes. His prince is always right, and the proof comes quickly because when they arrive, they find the area guarded by another orc mage. Once he realizes his plan was exposed, he splits the ground open, letting the orcs pour out. Among them are 3 orc valks, and they look terrifyingly strong. Then their leader points at Yuri and starts shouting something no one understands. So, they assume he's picking him as his opponent, meaning each of them has to take one. With that settled, the protagonist gives them one simple order: don't lose. He's still sure there's something down there that isn't an orc, and this battle won't truly end until he kills it. That makes the orbital in front of him nothing but a distraction, so Yuri attacks with everything he has. They clash in what first looks like an even fight until MC gets caught off guard. His enemy's blade nearly takes one of his eyes. It happens so fast that all it leaves behind is a line of blood, though he barely dodges in time to avoid a real wound. That small opening doesn't go unnoticed. The orbital licks the blood from his sword with a cruel grin. Yuri has no doubt now. This guy really knows how to use that blade. Even so, he doesn't let fear take over. Staying calm, he says he needs to end this fast and get back to his men. Then he attacks again, even harder than before. But even that isn't enough. The orbital dodges and redirects every key strike, wearing Yuri down second by second. It's like he can read every move. And worse, like he has no interest in ending this soon. He's just stalling. And at this rate, his men will pay the price. Just when he's about to sink into worry and self-hate, he remembers his master's words. When the mind wanders, the sword wanders too. No matter how urgent the fight is, if his blade can't keep up, he'll never reach his enemy. So, there always comes a moment when he must cast his worries aside and focus on why he's fighting. Those words instantly clear his mind. And more focused than ever, he leaps at his opponent, building enough force for one crushing blow. But he doesn't aim at the orbital or any of the other fools on the battlefield. He slams the ground instead, forcing out his real target all along, the worm that's been digging those tunnels. The strike is so powerful it sends out a huge shockwave that grabs everyone's attention. Even Jared looks over, wondering if Yuri can still be okay after pushing himself that hard. He sees him still standing in front of his enemy, but the effort was too much. The protagonist soon collapses. He used up every bit of mana he had, and it's even worse than he expected. The backlash is so bad he can't even stand again. The only thing that comforts him is the hope that the worm is just as badly hurt. Sadly, that's not the case. In the distance, Lauren glances away from his own opponent and sees the creature still moving. Seconds later, 4 more heads burst from the ground, ready to strike Yuri from behind. Luckily, Jared reaches him just in time, dragging him away from the attack. The blonde leaves his own opponent aside to deal with the threat before it's too late. Yuri thanks Jared for saving his life, and Jared snaps back that if he's really grateful, he should warn them before doing something that reckless next time. Then he stands, sees MC can't keep fighting, and accepts that it'll be up to him and Lauren to handle both the enemies and that creature he's never seen before. The situation is so bad that the blonde says out loud that dying to protect his prince would be the greatest honor of all. But Yuri forces himself up and raises his sword, insisting there's no need to think like that. They're going to win. Even if he can't really fight, sitting still isn't an option. So he orders them to spread out while he acts as bait, hoping to create an opening. Then, just as things turn grim, the fight is interrupted by Graham, who arrives with a solid group of soldiers sent by Ragna to support them. After that, the balance swings to the Alliance's side, and once everything is over, Yuri is resting in the infirmary. Graham gives the official report. After he attacked the worm, the enemies began fleeing in large groups. They likely realized they had no chance of winning once their route in was blocked, which also means they failed to capture anyone who could explain the real goal of the attack. Still, Ragnar praises Graham. If he hadn't arrived when he did, they would have lost one of the Alliance's most important members. Then he sends him out and stays alone with Yuri. Even though Kenob is still half asleep, he still scolds him for always becoming the center of attention. Then says that's exactly what the protagonist needs if he's going to become the future husband of Trina. Good thing the protagonist didn't hear that nonsense, or it might have killed him for real. Several days pass before he finally wakes up with the awful feeling that someone had wished a fate worse than death on him. Luckily, that bad feeling fades when Sylvia comes to visit and tells him the battle ended better than expected. While he was asleep, they still managed to move forward as planned. Then she asks how he feels, and Yuri realizes his mana has fully recovered, what she credits to herself. She treated him personally with her best holy techniques. After thanking her, MC asks where they are, but Sylvia says it's better if she shows him. So, she leads him outside the tent, and he stops cold when he sees where they are. They finally reach the Allied forces' destination, Okwa Fortress. That's why Sylvia thanks him too, admitting they never would have made it this far this fast without his skills. More than that, he's the reason their losses stayed so low. So, she says they're lucky to have him. But instead of accepting the praise, Yuri says he needs to ask a serious favor. Then he takes her hand and asks if she would pretend they're dating. Sylvia has no idea what he's talking about, but he explains that a marriage proposal will soon come from someone he really wants to avoid, and she could also use this to scare off any annoying suitors. Surprisingly, Sylvia agrees, but says she has one condition, and we don't get to hear it. And with that, season finale, chapter 53. All right,